So I live in a very old, multi-generation farmhouse, pretty much in the middle of nowhere, in the Midwest. The property, it has its history, like any here. There have been crimes, there's a Revolutionary War cemetery nearby. Yes, revolutionary, not Civil War. Lots of Frenchmen, only a quarter of a mile up the road. We're locally known as a haunted farmhouse, which doesn't surprise us, to be honest. Friends would sleep over as kids, and then they would refuse to set foot on the property ever again. We lost several babysitters growing up who were afraid of the hallway. Just your classic growing up in a haunted house childhood sort of thing. So, why this one's a bit weird? I'm pretty sure that this was not a haunting. Now, it's a peaceful countryside, rarely disturbed, but with lots of wild predators out there. And for this reason, we typically don't venture past the back patio once the sun goes down. However, recently, we had a pool installed, and this pool is fairly far out in the yard and a little closer to the woods than I really like. Despite this though, I'll go out to it if I'm not alone. My siblings are big on night swimming at the moment, and again, since I'm not alone, I typically join them. So, this was around 10 p.m. a few days ago. My siblings and I were relaxing in the pool and just generally goofing around a bit. Plenty of animal noises to let us know that the night was safe. Frogs, birds, crickets, all good things to give you an indication that nothing is wrong. If you live near farm and woodland, then you'll know what I mean. We didn't have any lights beyond the string of fairy lights that my dad draped around the edge of the pool, and even those only provided enough light to just see each other. But we were just some farm kids being farm kids. Until what we all swore was a voice whispered "hey" from the edge of the woods. Now, we are all immediately on high alert, and apparently so were the animals, because it all suddenly fell completely silent at the voice. Now, creeps wander their way onto the property sometimes, and people have broken in before. They see the old house and assume that we're wealthy, but we're not by any means. So we all assumed that it was just another weirdo. The problem is that really none of us knew what to do though. It was night, we had no lights, we had no weapons, and we were way too far from the house to call for help. Luckily for me though, my brother has recently grown from a cute little kid to a very imposing and intimidating man, and one who's not afraid to take charge. So he calls back in the firmest voice that he can manage, a simple "hey." Well, as soon as he does, something bolts out from under the brush faster than any person should be able to. It sort of looks like a person, but at the same time not. The limbs were too long, and it was running, but in a strange mixture of sort of on all fours and then bipedal, like it wasn't sure which one it was supposed to use or whatever. Its head didn't seem right too. But really, beyond that, I cannot explain it. It was almost like someone had tried to mold a human face from clay, but just didn't quite have the skills to do so. It didn't head for the pool, instead shooting into the cornfield behind us. And now we were scared. Again, we're still thinking that one of the local crackheads had simply taken too much and is messing around with us. Mind you, we're still terrified. I mean, crackheads are generally more dangerous than any paranormal creature, right? I mean, sure, Bigfoot might get blamed for the disappearances of the occasional hiker, but crackheads off people on the regular. So we do what we had been taught to do when danger was around us as kids. We all hopped out of the pool and stood in a tight group. There's 4 of us, and so we all stand in a little square with our backs to each other, our way of keeping eyes open on everything. We had barely shuffled maybe a few feet toward the house when we heard a bone-chilling, animalistic scream echoing from the field that this thing had just disappeared into. Not an angry scream, but more like a pained one. It was feline, deep in its throat. Bobcats are native to the area, and cougars have been known to wander in as well, so It's not unlikely that one had been in that field. What really had us questioning, though, was what could have made that sound, and there are no predators bigger than these around. The area has a small but stable population of black bears, but they really don't tend to mess with other predators, and if there'd been a fight, then we would have heard more than just a scream. But then this smell hit us. The smell of blood, fresh and lots of it. No doubt the result of an animal in the field, but with the strange figure darting into the field only a few moments before we'd heard it and smelled it, that told us all that we needed to know. Then there was another voice, oddly monotone and different from the soft one the thing had spoken with when we were in the pool, now coming from the field. It somehow sounded like a yell and a perfectly level request all at the same time. It's hard to describe, but it was weird. "Come here. I want you to come here, please." Well, we bolted. It takes a lot to make us panic. We've grown up around the weirdest of weird, but the moment that strange voice demanded that we come to it, we knew that playtime was over, and we all made a break for the house together quickly. Into the house, we locked the door, all immediately running to my brother's bedroom. His is the biggest and our unofficial meeting spot, really. It is also the only bedroom that faces the woods and the field. We kept the lights off and just sort of sat in the quiet for a minute. We would normally all laugh it off once we were in a relatively safe place, but for some reason we just didn't this time. Then the voice called, louder but still incredibly cold, still coming from the direction of the field. The window muffled it enough that we really couldn't understand it, and it only made us more nervous, really. My sister, she cracked the window the tiniest bit though, just to let the sound in. It was calling for us. It kept saying, "Hey, come here, please. I want you to come here, please." Then it appeared again, just out of the cornfield, just at the edge. Its skin, though the flesh toned, had a strange grey quality to it. It hunched in on itself, sort of like its long limbs were too heavy for it to hold up or something. It didn't seem to see us in the window, instead circling the pool twice, like it was looking for us. I guessed that it didn't hear us run for the house. We watched as it stood there for a second. It called again, something angrier this time. "Hello, come here, come here." We didn't move. It felt like maybe an hour too that we watched it, but it was probably maybe a few minutes to be honest. But then, much slower than it had appeared, it began to shamble away back the way that it came into the woods. All the while, it just kept calling, "Come here, hello, hello, come here, please." Its gait, though, was uneven, like its hips weren't the same height or something. It smacked rather aggressively at something that I couldn't see in the dark. I know a frustrated gesture when I see it, though I caught a flash of its hand, and it was way too big for a person's. Weirdly, too, it looked almost right from the distance that I could see it, but like the fingers of each finger had 4 joints instead of 3 almost. I could be mistaken about that because we were pretty far away, but still, I thought that I would mention it. And well, with that it shambled away, the sound of its strange footsteps disappearing as soon as it passed back into the shadows. So, what the heck was that thing? I have never seen anything like it, even after living in a paranormal hotspot for a really long time. Usually when I see something spooky or unusual, I try to snap a pic and let it go, but this was new and this was scary. Quite honestly, it felt dangerous. We did go out and search the field the next day when the sun was high and bright, but we didn't find anything. No bobcat, no blood, nothing. So, what were we smelling? And what animal did we hear? I got the uneasy feeling that it might have been trying to lure us away from the house, perhaps trying to imitate a person in trouble, but that doesn't explain why it didn't seem to pursue when we ran for the house like we did, or even realize that we were gone. My sister suggested that it might have been blind, which quite honestly is pretty smart. I don't care though if it was blind, because I will never be going swimming at night, ever again. Back when I was in my early 20s, I was desperate to move in with my then girlfriend. We didn't have much money, so finding a place was difficult that was within our budget. Every day, I opened up the Property Pal website, a local buying or letting site here in Ireland, and filtered price low to high. And I was shocked when I saw a 2-bedroom apartment for rent for £450 per month. I quickly called my girlfriend, showed her the advert, and we arranged to view it with the letting agent. It was a strange layout though. The front door was directly on the pavement. When you walk in through the front door, you were met with a set of stairs. These stairs led you to the first floor, where there were 2 double bedrooms and a bathroom. You then went up a second flight of stairs where the living room and the kitchen were, an upside-down apartment practically. For us, though, it was pretty flashy, newly decorated and close to town. So within a week, we were accepted for it and moved in. And that is when things started to take a turn. You see, I was obsessed with vinyl records back then. I had 12 of my favorite ones framed and nailed them firmly into the living room wall. One evening, my girlfriend and I were sitting watching TV in the living room when, the next minute, one of my vinyls aggressively fell off the wall. We both jumped and I ran over to check it out. I assumed that maybe the nail had slipped. But when I checked it over, the nail was still firmly attached to the wall, as well as the metal holder on the back of the vinyl frame. I recall sort of scratching my head, wondering how that could have happened. But we both shrugged it off. I mean, maybe I had just not hung it right or something. Well, the exact same evening as we settled down again to watch TV, we suddenly heard the kettle begin to boil. We both looked at each other as if to say, what the heck? I mean, neither of us had boiled the kettle. I walked into the kitchen to check it out, and lo and behold, the kettle was boiling by itself. I clicked it off and I went back into the living room. My girlfriend said, maybe the electrics are just dodgy. And so, once again, we shrugged it off. Little did we know, though, that that was only the start of it. The next day was a Friday, and so we decided to have our friend over in the evening to show her the new place. Our friend, Becky, she was going to be staying in the guest bedroom. As we said goodnight to her and headed into our own bedroom, around 15 minutes later, she sends a text message to my mobile. Why are you pacing back and forth in the bathroom? Are you okay? For context from the guest bedroom, if you looked out of the window, you'd be able to see the translucent bathroom window. I wrote back, huh? What are you on about? We're both in bed. A few seconds pass and Becky comes racing into our bedroom saying that there's someone walking back and forth in the bathroom. Now, I'm a girl and my partner was a girl and Becky was clearly a girl too, and the 3 of us in our early 20s started whispering to each other what to do. I know what you're thinking. Call the police. Someone has already broken in. But instead, they tell me to go and kick the bathroom door open with my foot. We turn the bedroom light on, the hallway light on, and I run and swing open the bathroom door. But when I do, there's no one, and silence. We check the front door, and it's locked. We check every inch of the flat, in fact, and there's nothing. The 3 of us head back into our bedroom, and Becky says that she's sleeping on our floor tonight. She swears that someone was in there, and to be quite honest, I don't disbelieve her, but I'm also a bit of a skeptical person. Maybe it was just a shadow from outside. Basically, I try to reassure myself and them that there would be a perfectly explainable rationale for this. On the Sunday, my girlfriend is heading home to see her parents, and I don't mind as I'm working a shift anyway. I worked in a cinema at the time. It's a bright sunny day, and as I'm sitting by the mirror in our bedroom getting ready, I start to hear what sounds like someone gurgling water at the back of their throat. I pause and perk my hearing up in an attempt to figure out where it's coming from. I open the bedroom door and follow the gurgling. It's coming from the guest bedroom. As I open the guest bedroom door, I'm thinking to myself, I'm confused. It sounds like someone's gurgling or a drain slowly backing water up or something. I walk into the room and the very next minute, it is completely ice cold. I freeze up standing still, and right beside my ear I suddenly hear gurgling, as if someone is slowly and gently gurgling liquid in their throat. Well, that was enough for me. I ran out of the room and called my girlfriend, trying to explain what had just happened. She told me to just leave, to get out of the flat, head into town or work early, and we could talk about it later when she was home. I left that flat almost in tears that day, adrenaline pumping through my body just trying to understand what the heck that was. That evening, my girlfriend got home and we were in bed talking about all the weird events that had happened in the short time that we had moved in. In a bid to try and lighten the mood, my girlfriend decides to name the ghost. She turns to me and says, "I think it's a ghost, and she's an angry woman and her name is Rachel." I told her to stop. I wasn't finding it funny. My girlfriend then says, "What's Rachel going to do next? Ruin another vinyl?" At this point, I'm angry because I'm scared and I don't like what's going on. My girlfriend tells me to wise up and we both turn around and we head to sleep. During that night, though, I am woken up. I lay there with my eyes open, just thinking over everything. My eyes move around our bedroom, and they stop to look at my acoustic guitar, which is rested leaning back in its guitar stand. I begin to drift off again, when a few minutes go by, and both of us are suddenly awoken by my guitar falling across to the other side of the room, literally the other side. We both jump out of bed, switch the light on, and I pick up my guitar up to check for scratches. I know, first thought, and it's that, right? But anyway, it's then that I realize that it just wouldn't have been possible for my guitar to have fallen from its stand in the first place, let alone right across the room. I mean, it was strapped in at the neck of the guitar. I started to cry and tell my girlfriend that that was it. I'm not staying here anymore. She asks where we're supposed to go in the middle of the night without looking or sounding crazy, and so I make up a silly excuse to call my parents and tell them that I'm not feeling well and can we stay with them. For reference, I'm a type 1 diabetic, so my parents are used to me being unwell and wanting to stay with them from time to time. So we call a taxi and we leave for my parents. And to this day, they still have no idea why we really left. But the last event to happen in that flat before we both quit our lease 11 months early was this. We had to go back to the flat, obviously. I mean, all of our belongings were there. We tried to get on with things and just sort of ignore any strange happenings. In fairness, all was seemingly quiet for the next few days. I cannot recall anything happening. That was until our last evening in the flat. We were both in bed on our mobiles, just browsing social media, nothing exciting. As we were browsing and showing each other silly memes, we suddenly hear what sounded like glass bottles being shook or rattled in a bag, coming from the bathroom. Imagine a black bag filled with like glass beer bottles and someone shaking it. It's the only way that I can describe the noise, but we both look at each other and frown, as if to say, what the heck is that? I get out of bed and we both switch on the lights as I walk up to the bathroom door, which is slightly ajar. The noise, it is 100% coming from in there, and it's now so loud that it's hurting my ears, as it sounds like the bottles of glass are about to shatter almost. Well, I kick open the door and suddenly it falls silent, but so silent that I could hear my girlfriend literally breathing. You think you know what you'd do in that situation of utter shock, but in that moment, you've really got no clue what you do. So I pick up my mobile from my pocket, I call Becky and ask if we can come and stay with her. Thankfully, she's awake and she says of course. We pack an overnight bag and we then head to hers. The next day, we called the letting agent and say that things just aren't working out and unfortunately we're going to have to end our lease. The letting agent is pretty ticked off by this and told us that there would be a fine to pay for ending it early, but I didn't care. That was the least of my worries. Months go by and we finally get a new place. At some point I decided to do some research on the street and not much really came up until I saw one article. It was about the Belfast Blitz during the war and the exact street and location of that flat was mentioned. The article had an interview of a man who lived in the street during the Blitz and owned a bar apparently. Within it, he mentioned trying to save the bar, however the bombs would cause just too much damage. But I wondered, was the noise we heard, the glass clinking, was it linked in some way? To this day, I still have no idea. The flat was put up for sale a few years ago though, and even looking at the pictures of it genuinely made me feel sick and uncomfortable. So, summer is here, more sun, more light, and more time to do all the things that make summer so special. And the number one thing that you don't want to be doing all summer? Spending hours cooking inside. That's where Factor comes in. Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals are ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well. Factor meals arrive fresh and ready to eat, perfect for any active lifestyle over summer and beyond. With 45 weekly menu options, you can pick gourmet meals that fit your summer gains and goals. Choose from options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. Factor powers your day, sunup to sundown, with nutritious breakfasts, on-the-go lunches, premium dinners, and guilt-free snacks and desserts. Factor has your whole day completely covered. Enjoy more this summer. Get Factor if you want all the flavor and none of the fuss. Personally, I decided to try the protein range as I'm back at the gym this year. And not only has it really fit in with my schedule and made staying on track with my diet so much easier, but their chicken Florentine was absolutely delicious. That creamy garlic and cauliflower was incredible. Honestly, I've used Factor meals, and if you're busy like me and looking for easy, delicious meals that keep you on track, then you should genuinely give them a try. So, get started at factormeals.com/scared50off and use code SCARED50OFF to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code SCARED50OFF at factormeals.com/scared50off for 50% off plus free shipping. factormeals.com/scared50off. I, female and 28, work as a bartender in a bar restaurant. Last night at work, I had a very strange old man come in for a drink. As soon as he sat down, I had a bad feeling about him. He ordered a beer and started talking about his day and whatnot. He said that he was from the area, but moved to the state capital back in the 70s or the 80s, and that he visits for 1 week every July. The conversation, it was normal really, at least for about 10 minutes. He continued by telling me about his family and what it was like growing up here. After the conversation had finished, he pulled out envelopes with stacks of photos in them. My gut was telling me that the photos were something bad, but I'd hoped that it was just photos from his trips. The first one was an AI-generated photo of a cat on a surfboard, but after that, all the other ones were of young women. The photos were all AI-generated, and all the women in the photos that he was showing me were celebrities wearing a typical Daisy Duke outfit. I tried to be friendly and told him how crazy it was that the internet can make these photos of celebrities just look so real. At one point, he did show me a picture of a real lady that apparently he watches on YouTube, but it was similar to the other photos. She was wearing tiny shorts bent over the engine of her truck. But At this point, the cooks were leaving for the night, and really I was the only employee left in the building. The owner was in the office working on paperwork. I went back and let him know that I was getting a really weird vibe from this guy, and he agreed, saying that the cooks were talking about him and the bartender the night before had talked to him then as well. He thanked me for letting him know, and so I went back to work. He shuffled through his photos again, looking for something to show me, but let me know that he could not show me any because the women were only wearing their panties. I tried to avoid the guy after that, but there were only a few other patrons in the building, and they were all sitting at the tables at this stage. I went to do some cleaning behind the bar, and he started talking about the girl from YouTube and how young and pretty she is. He pointed out that she looks like a teenager, and that's why he liked her videos so much, but told me that she is in her 30s or something. I am a young-looking girl too. Most people who don't know me actually think that I'm like 20 or 21-ish, so this made me pretty uncomfortable. In any case, I ignored the comments about her, and he started talking about his family again. I was responding with bare minimum responses, just trying to make it to close in 15 minutes. All the patrons had left at this point except for him, and I let him know that we would be closing very soon, and that he should probably start gathering his things. Now, instead of picking up his photos, he said something about why he moved to the state capital. I was barely listening at this point, until he said that he was told to leave the city. I didn't say anything or ask about it, but he continued saying that the county court had him sent away all those years ago. It just so happened that there's a large prison in the state's capital, and it seemed like more than just a coincidence too. At this point, I'm about to tell the owner to kick him out when he starts talking about why he was sent there or something. It was a story of how he did something breast-related to a girl in elementary school. I'm not very good at guessing people's ages, but there's no way that this man was in elementary school in the 70s or the 80s. He said that the girl told the teacher on him, even though it didn't happen, apparently, but no one believed him, so he got sent away. He said that he was resentful towards this girl for many, many years until he heard that she had special needs and isn't mentally capable of making up a lie like that. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't tell if he was saying that he did it or if the teacher was the one lying. We were closing in 2 minutes at this point anyway, so I tried to wrap up this conversation by telling him that I hope his trip was nice and to have a safe trip home. He slowly picked up his things, and I walked around the bar to the tables by the front door to lock it after he left. He walked towards the door slower than I've ever seen anyone walk, and he'd always walk towards me, even if I was standing next to a table away from the door. Quite honestly, I was terrified at this point, so I called my husband and put my phone in my pocket in case something did happen. At that moment, the owner turned half the lights off and walked towards me. I politely told the man that he has to leave now, and again I said I hope he has a safe trip. As he opened the door to leave, he turned back around though, and then he said, "I'll probably be back tomorrow to see you. I don't leave until Sunday." Now, I went to work today and I informed my co-workers on what had happened, and we casually joked about it. One of the other bartenders had talked to the man the night before he came in. The bartender, male and 29, said that he's a cool dude and just called him a little bit goofy, I guess. I was joking around about carding the man if he came in again, even though he was clearly old enough to drink, just so that I could get his name. At that point, my coworker told me his first name though, and with that information, and the fact that I knew the city that he was currently living in, and where he was originally from, I could hopefully find him online. So when I got home, I started searching for his name, followed by assaulting girl or whatever, the years that I thought that it had taken place, and the cities that he had lived in. When I'd find something that matched, I'd look up the full name and see the mugshots to match the face. after about maybe an hour of doing this, I had a match, but it was so much more than I had bargained for. The article with the mugshot that I had clicked on, it led me to discover that back in 1995, he was the prime suspect in the murder of a teenage girl. The case against him was eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, mishandling of evidence or something, and also his mental state. And after a few years, he was allegedly released from prison. There were many local news articles about his assaults against young women, but I couldn't read them without paying, so in the end I just sort of moved on. But while I was looking through the search results, I came across a subreddit post. I later found more, but it was dedicated to this man. The post was from like 10 years ago, and reading it I learned that he was very well known in the city that he resided in, mostly because of his flamboyant appearance and mode of transportation. Not only that, but the comments were filled with stories very similar to mine. He'd constantly go into local businesses and he would harass the young women working there to the point of getting banned from many of these places. In his city, people seem to know that if he comes into your business, then you need to hide all of the female employees. There was one other news article that I found too that I didn't have to pay for, stating that the police had been called on him for harassing a young female employee and threatening to stalk her. It was also stated in the article that he had told her that she reminds him of a character in a book where a man stalks and kills her. And I believe that this happened just before the murder. This and his repeated creepy behavior towards women led most people to believe that he was in fact guilty of the murder. Well, years after he was acquitted, a prisoner had told an investigator that a nameless person had admitted to the murder and took some souvenirs apparently. The nameless person then hid the items on a bike path that the old man frequented. Unfortunately, nothing ever came from this, but still creepy, right? This was all very hard to digest, being face to face with a possible murderer, hearing all of these other young girls experiencing the same things that I did, and most of all, seeing how my male co-worker saw this man I was so clearly afraid of. Thankfully, the man hadn't come back to see me, and all of my male co-workers, for the most part anyway, they took it seriously and made it a point to make sure that the women made it safely out of work at night. I really hope that I never see this old man again, and if I do, I will be reporting him to the police. I used to hate everything related to horror, and in 2015, my boyfriend invited me to Loftus Hall, a haunted manor in Ireland, to a paranormal lockdown. He told me that we were going to spend a few hours locked in this manor. If I remember right, it was from around 8 PM to 2 AM, and there would be rituals to contact ghosts. And after a lot of resistance, I decided to go. Initially, I thought that I would get there and that there would be people behind walls or doors and chain sounds to scare us or whatever. I was prepared for a bunch of fabricated stuff to give us a bit of a jump scare, but upon arrival, we were exploring the outside of this place. Loftus Hall is a huge mansion on the hook of the peninsula of Wexford. The place is in bits, but it is stunning. All the windows were covered with wood though, so I didn't know what to expect really. The little beach that only fits 2 people at a time was creepy enough for me, but the adventure, it hadn't even started yet. When we got to the manor, the ghost hunters explained that we would be going through around 4 rooms plus the cemetery. We couldn't drink alcohol, smoke, or use any type of substance there. They told us that it dated back to the 1600s, and throughout history a lot of things had happened there. It was home to a family that the daughter tragically died there after giving birth to a child and being locked in a room by her dad. Her name was Anne, apparently. A convent that we all know have their heavy reputations. A lot of them were in the cemetery at the back, and a nun died on the stairs. And it was also a hotel with a couple that ran it for a long time until it was basically left in ruins. The whole lockdown was creepy though, different to what I thought it would be. There were no jump scares. We walked around this manor, going to specific rooms and listening to the stories. We played with a Ouija board, and people would swear that it was moving by itself, and we were getting some messages too. There was this lady that kept saying something was touching her, and in my head I was thinking that she was paid to say that, but I thought it was such a waste of money at the time, but I'll admit that I was happy that my boyfriend was happy. But then we entered the third room. It was the front room of the manor, and for some reason when I got in, I immediately felt uncomfortable. No tension at all, mind you. It was dark, but as I got in there was a 3-seater old couch to my right in front of a little bathroom with a half-open door. The room was big and full of windows, but like I mentioned earlier, they were covered by wood. In some parts I could see the light of the moon coming in from outside. I could hear the sea waves outside too, and I just knew that that room would have been stunning in its prime. I sat on the couch beside 2 strangers. They were male, young, and throughout the whole lockdown I noticed them giggling a bit. My boyfriend, he was sitting on the couch's arm beside me, right in front of the bathroom. The hunters were telling us the story of the hotel, how the couple running it enjoyed throwing parties, etc. As it happened, I saw a little red light coming out of the bathroom and floating fast around the room. Honestly, I thought that someone had a laser pointer, but I couldn't find where it was coming from. I looked at my boyfriend and pointed it out to him. He didn't give it much attention and kept paying attention to the story. The light flashed around the wall for a few minutes, but nobody was looking at it. Then it just faded away. But then I got a strong smell of alcohol. I just thought that the 2 strangers beside of me were drinking before the event. And then suddenly I smelled cigarettes too, but it was a bit different from my own cigarette that I used to smoke. It had a strong perfume of tobacco, stronger than I'd ever smelled. Once again, I thought the guys beside me were to blame, and in my head it was probably tobacco from another country, or maybe cigars even, but I didn't give it too much attention. I'll admit though that I wanted the light to come back so I could show it to my boyfriend this time. The hunters stated that nothing was happening in the room and we needed more energy, so they asked all of us to stand up, placed us in a circle, and told us to call Michael out loud and welcome him to the group. Michael was apparently the hotel owner that slept in the room with his wife. So then we started, saying things like, "Come on Michael, present yourself, contact us." People were all saying it out loud as I observed, and then I decided to join in. I said, "Come on Michael, come to us." And suddenly, I swear to you that my right arm started raising by itself. Genuinely, it was as if something was lifting it for me. I even looked at it as it lifted, palms down about 60 degrees. Then I called my boyfriend's attention. "Babe," I said and looked at him, and that is when my other arm starts going up and stopped at around 30 degrees. I tried to lower my arms, but there was something there supporting it and not allowing me to lower them. Then I started feeling a vibration on my lower back, and then also a vibration on my upper lip to the left. My brain started processing how that was abnormal, and I said I wanted to stop, in the name of Jesus, and my arms literally fell both at the same time. It didn't hurt me, but honestly I was unbelievably terrified. Then the same woman as before said, "Oh, something pinched me," which distracted everyone from me. The lockdown, it went on. The next room had this bed with a baby cot and a doll in the middle, and we sat along the walls waiting for something to happen. But I believe to this day that I destroyed the event for everyone else from that moment on that happened to me because I whispered in the name of Jesus. So for the rest of the time there, really nothing happened in this room, and we eventually moved to the cemetery. where I kept whispering my prayer in Portuguese and staring at the sky the whole time to not take a chance to see a ghost, a nun, or a child there or something. The sky is the most beautiful sky that I'd ever looked at, though. There were so many shooting stars that I don't know if it was special for that night or if it was normal, but seriously, from that moment on I started counting, like maybe 11 shooting stars. It was beautiful. In the end, one of the lady hunters came to chat with me, though, and she said that in the position that I was in, it looked like I was dancing with a man in old style, like one hand on the shoulder and the other on the man's hand. She said that Michael was known for drinking a lot and being very charming towards the ladies on the balls that they threw at the hotel. I never mentioned to anyone there that I smelled the alcohol, the smoke, or saw that light. I also never mentioned the vibration of my lower back, which honestly really matches with her theory that I was taken to a dance by a charming ghost that smoked and apparently drank a lot. There was other women there too, but I do have a look that people call exotic, I guess, so maybe that's why he picked me or whatever. In any case, we made a cleanse before leaving, so everything that was from there stayed there. And honestly, I thank God that we did that. Because after that experience, I genuinely believe in ghosts now. My husband believes that I was hypnotized during the activity, but in any case, it was one of the most incredible things that has ever happened to me. This happened to me when I was younger. I was maybe officially in my double digits, but still around the age where the only scary stuff that you know and believe is the cliche things like zombies, vampires, werewolves, the devil, things like that. I had and still have best friends who happened to be twins, and we lived in New Jersey at the time. I lived about 15 minutes away from their house. The area that I lived in was nothing but houses, but they lived in pretty much the middle of nowhere. Woods and woods and more woods just for ages. And naturally, we loved this. I met them in the 3rd grade and we started hanging out at around 4th grade, I think. And well, from the start, they told me about all the paranormal stuff that they claimed happened around their house. They were the first people to get me into the spookier side of things. They introduced me to YouTubers whose videos still give me chills now as an adult. From the start, though, they told me of a supposed Satanist cult in the area. Now, again, I wasn't a huge believer in ghosts or anything at that age, but it was interesting to hear about it from 2 kids who very clearly were believers. Anyways, there's a field pretty close to their house, and about halfway down that field is this quarry. There's a gravel road, a pit road is what we called it, that leads through the woods and down into the field so workers and trucks can come and go to the quarry. Well, just in these woods, a short maybe 5-minute walk from pit road, was a spot that they called the Devil's Triangle. They never explained it, so I had no idea what it looked like, but they told me about it all the time. I always pictured some sort of ritualistic table with skulls and candles and whatnot, being a young kid. But we talked about it and we just never really went there. Until a year or so of hanging out. So sometime around maybe the 5th grade, they finally decided to take me there. We made the short walk to the field, then along the tree lines surrounding it, and eventually onto Pit Road. We avoided the passing trucks as people, especially children, weren't allowed back there at all. And eventually they pointed and told me that we needed to step off of the trail and into the woods to continue. The second, though, and I mean the exact second that my foot hit that grass and the leaves off of the trail, it hit me. This burning, spine-tingling sensation of just being watched, of eyes burning into the back of your neck. It was also accompanied by this horrendous butterfly feeling in my stomach, like any second I would throw up. I kept quiet, though. I didn't want to chicken out. They would think that I was a wimp after all. So we carried on. And eventually, I saw it. Absolutely nothing. Until we stepped closer. I can only describe it as like a crater in the ground, a random 7 to 8 foot deep circle on the ground, probably about 30, 40 some odd feet in diameter. I'm not super great with measurements. But the odd thing about it was the fact that the center of the crater was raised, leveled with the ground outside of it, and on the center was an old fold-out table. I say old, but it could have been only a year old, but the weather had made it look nasty and worn, and it was almost snapped in 2 pieces now. And that was it. The Devil's Triangle was more of a Devil's Donut, really. This is where they pointed out the triangle aspect, though. You see, there were 3 trees, and these were the only signs of life in the forest filled with it. 3 trees on the outer edge of the crater. They just so happened to form a triangle from the crater. Moving on from the descriptions, we stood on the edge of it, not really wanting to step in considering that it was supposedly evil. But the youngest of the twins, C, decided that we should, and so we did. When I say that chills were constantly going down my back as we walked into the woods, well, they only intensified 100-fold as we stepped down into this triangle. And then I remember nothing. Absolutely nothing. One of the twins, M, stayed close, seeing that I had been getting paler the whole walk to the triangle, but he did explore, just like C, and we separated at one point. All staying in the triangle, but just not side by side or anything. After 5 minutes, when M looked at me, he said that I was looking around, but I was sort of blank-faced. He apparently said, "You look really bored, P." My response to him, "M, come here." "I'm right here, dude." "No, I mean, come here now." He said that I didn't shout. I wasn't angry. I sort of wasn't anything, really. But something made him come over to me, and the second that he stood beside me, one of those 3 trees just suddenly fell. A perfectly healthy, intact, living, quite large tree just seemed to collapse. And I mean exactly where he was standing not even 3 seconds ago. C looked over, asking what happened. M responded and explained the situation. C looked at me and asked, "Why did you call M over?" I knew. They asked me about 59 times what I knew meant before I apparently suggested that we leave. So we ran. After about 5 minutes of running, they said that we stopped to catch our breath, and that is where my memory suddenly seems to kick back in. I do remember stopping to breathe, but really that's about it. I don't remember going into the triangle. I certainly don't remember calling M to me. I don't remember the tree. I don't even remember leaving the triangle and running. All I remember is catching my breath, and then I was fine. Trying to play it off to act like I hadn't just lost crucial moments of our lives, I asked them to repeat what had happened to make sure that I remembered it correctly, and they did. Word for word, too, they both swore that the same thing happened. In fact, they still do to this day, and they don't know that I don't remember it, that I have no idea what made me say those things. Really, I don't know what to make of it. I don't want to say that it was a demon because, I mean, really it saved my friend, but it happened and I cannot remember a damn thing. That story is one of 2 times that I've had some connection with the paranormal or something off, and I just knew that someone else or something else was there with us, or maybe apparently speaking through me. Naturally, I haven't told many people because I think that they'd assume that I was just crazy, so I figured that I would share it through here. When I was younger, I remember staying at my grandmother's house with my Aunt Pam. I was at that age where I'd ask questions about everything that I didn't know the answer to. I'd been walking down the hallway to the bathroom when I stopped at a framed photo of a little boy that I had seen hundreds of times before, but it dawned on me that I had no clue who it was. This wasn't unusual for my family, as we're from northeast Tennessee and our family tree is so messed up that it looks like a child's drawing. I don't even really know my real relation to my Aunt Pam, to be honest, but everyone called her aunt, so I just went with it, even though she was well into her 70s when I had turned 10. I called out to my Aunt Pam, though, and I asked her who the little boy in the picture was. Her face grew grim, and her eyes held a look of sorrow that I hadn't seen before that. She simply said, "That was my brother." Now, when I was a kid, I was and still am a bit of a smart aleck, and I hated how Southern slang uses "was" for everything. So I thought that I was being smart when I said, "It's not was if he's still around." Most of the time, she would have been annoyed with me for correcting her, but instead, her reply floored my young brain. Well, he's deader than a doornail, so I guess it really doesn't matter. Now, I'm going to tell the rest of the story in third person in a sort of holistic view of how it's been told to me over the years. Keep in mind, my family is from the heart of Appalachia, which means that the stereotypes for hillbillies are exactly correct in pretty much every regard. So certainly feel free to imagine them that way. This took place when my Aunt Pam was 16 and her little brother Bobby was 8. Pam was the oldest of the 5 siblings, and she practically raised them due to her mother working late most nights at a diner, and her father, who everyone refers to as Big Daddy, and so will I in this story, worked in a coal mine and was often stuck working late into the night as well. Now, all the kids attended the same school, which was held in one tiny building with just a few classrooms and a small playground outside. After school, Bobby would often ride his cherry red bicycle in the coal mine, in which Big Daddy worked, to spend some time with him before going home for dinner. Bobby did this one evening, but when he arrived at the coal mine, someone was standing outside the opening, someone Bobby had never seen before. It looked like a man, but he had this eerie greenish-grey skin with sunken dark eyes, apparently. He wore a cherry-red bandana around part of his face, like a biker would. Bobby immediately felt uneasy at this man's presence, allegedly. The man went down and his eyes widened, like he was happy at Bobby's presence. He pointed at Bobby's bicycle, his voice a low guttural growl. "I like your bike, kid. Cherry red, the best color." He laughed creepily after that, and Bobby mustered up enough courage to respond respectfully. Thank you, sir." Bobby set his bike down and went to go around the man when he stopped him. "Can I ride it?" Bobby was horrified at this point. I mean, why would a grown man want to ride a child's bicycle? My dad's inside the mine waiting for me." Bobby picked his bike back up and took it with him into the mine to meet Big Daddy. He went up to Big Daddy and asked him who the guy was outside. Big Daddy said that he was the only one working that day, though, and he didn't know anyone of that description. Big Daddy brushed it off, but Bobby was still worried. So worried that he stayed with Big Daddy until his workday was done and they walked home together. When they arrived home, Bobby went to play with his siblings and tell them about the Green Man. He told them the story, and all of them, including Pam, thought that he was just making it up. Bobby had the reputation of a bit of a redneck brat that liked to cause trouble, so when trouble really did come knocking, no one tended to believe him. That is, until later that night when all of the kids were roughhousing in a bedroom, jumping on the beds and hitting each other with pillows, the whole lot. They all stopped when they heard something outside of the window, like a quiet knock. Before Pam could stop him, Bobby pulled the curtains open, and there on the other side of the window stood that same green man, clad in that cherry red bandana, now with a wicked look in his eyes. All the kids stood in silence, shock overtaking them. Out of fear and just immaturity of a child, I guess, Bobby spit on the window, like a silent screw you to the green man. A low growl was then heard from the other side of the window, followed by a "you will regret that, brat." One of the youngest kids finally screamed, alerting Big Daddy and their mother, who came running in. The kids, they hurriedly explained what they saw, but looking through the window, there was no trace of anyone being outside. Now, since we're in the south, Big Daddy grabs his shotgun and goes outside, the whole 9 yards, ready to rock this dude's world in the worst way possible. Big Daddy looks around, but he finds nothing. No tracks, no trace of the supposed green man. Bobby was absolutely terrified, though, the rest of the night, so he shared a bed with Pam, who protected him throughout the night, even though she was petrified herself. Now, the next day, the kids went to school as normal, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Pam and Bobby, they finished their classes before the rest of their siblings, so Pam would usually work on homework inside and watch Bobby play on the playground outside through the window. This day was no different, despite the events of the previous night. It all happened so fast, though. Pam looked up and saw this huge 18-wheeler barreling down the street. As it got closer, she froze. The driver, it was the green man from the previous day, and Bobby was eerily close to the road, trying to balance and walk around the curb. Pam tried to make it to him, but the 18-wheeler, it was too fast. The police, they searched for the 18-wheeler and the green man for years, but unfortunately, nothing ever surfaced, and poor Bobby's murderer has never been apprehended, leaving Pam and the rest of the family completely devastated, as you can probably imagine. I'm 15, and me and my cousin live near a forest that's always felt a bit strange. It's split into 2 areas though, the upper part, where my mum had strange experiences years ago, and the lower part where we saw something. 4 years ago, I saw a small figure behind an oak tree in broad daylight. It had a big pale head, a black coat, and huge black eyes. It swayed slowly while staring at me, and I said to it, "Who are you?" No response though. We stared at each other for maybe about 10 to 15 seconds. I went to get my phone and it vanished. That same area always gave me a bit of a bad feeling, like I was being watched. I stopped going there for years because of this too. But recently, my cousin saw the same thing, only this time it had no face. He thought that it was my mum at first, until he realized that something was off. We compared our stories, and it matched perfectly. It moved the same way and everything. My mum once told us that she was chased by a white figure in the upper woods near a big oak. When she got home, a rooster crowed and whatever it was apparently vanished. That oak tree got cut down and nothing strange ever happened there again, but now the lower woods are active. Last year, me and my cousin heard something hitting the ground over and over again for about an hour at night. It was steady and like someone hitting the dirt with leather or something. Our dog disappears every night and only comes back in the morning, and he refuses to go near that part of the forest. Last night, we were on the balcony talking about visiting a local religious man for help, and right then, something heavy moved in the woods below us. A day earlier, my cousin had cursed at whatever was out there, and I told him not to do that. And now I'm thinking that might have been a huge mistake. We're planning to go and talk to someone tomorrow, and we won't leave anything out, but if anyone has had a similar experience or knows what this could be, then I would genuinely love some advice. Things seem to be getting worse, and while I was outside at around 9 p.m, I've heard walking in the forest now. I was with my cousin this time, so we decided to go and check it out. We came to the fence where it was close to the forest, and we have clapped a few times to maybe scare it off, but then after I clapped, I was suddenly holding eye contact with something that I can only describe as out of this world. In the dark part of the forest, I was looking at a tall, really tall figure with a huge head, wide open black eyes, and mouth open wide with something red in there. I've heard of jinns before, and honestly, I think that this could be one. I held eye contact with it for 30 to 45 seconds, I would guess, until I told my cousin, "Do you see it?" And he said, "Who?" And he slowly peeked to the dark where I could see him and says, "Yeah, but they're only looking at you." And then he ran out of panic, and so I did too. I wasn't scared until my cousin ran, but then me and him were on the balcony talking when all of a sudden beneath us, I swear to you that we could hear walking, straight up walking, but we checked there and there's nothing. I have no idea what is happening all of a sudden, but did I or someone interrupt something? Did we wake something up? Like I said before as well, I'm beginning to think that what I saw was a djinn, and so if that's the case, then what can I do about it? When I was around 11 or 12 years old, there was a wedding near my house and I was invited. I went with my mum. Weddings at night are pretty common where I live. At the wedding, I was hanging out with some neighborhood kids who were older than me. Most of them decided to go to a nearby park, which was right beside a temple. The kind of creepy part, though, is that both the park and the temple were located inside of a forest. It wasn't a huge forest, but it was still pretty creepy at night. There was also another kid. His name was Max. He was about 14, a couple of years older than me. Max and I also wanted to go, but when we asked our mums, they said no. Obviously, we were pretty disappointed by that, especially since the others had already gone ahead. After a while, we started feeling really bored and kept bugging our mums to let us go. Eventually, though, they gave in and said okay, and we were excited and headed out. The path that we took was dimly lit, with the occasional street lamp flickering above us. On the right side of the road, there were houses, but the left side was swallowed in the darkness of the forest. As we walked, I started feeling strange, though, and I couldn't explain it, but something in the air just felt heavy. I suddenly had this cold sensation down my spine, like somebody was watching me from the trees. I didn't say anything to Max at the time, but I kept glancing toward the woods, half expecting to see something or someone peering out. As we were walking, though, we passed by a house on the right, and it looked completely normal, nothing strange. I mean, we had seen that house plenty of times before, since we lived nearby. But this time we saw a woman near the main gate of the house, next to a water tap and a few buckets. She seemed to be washing clothes. We obviously thought that that was a bit weird. I mean, who the heck washes their clothes at around 8:30 p.m. outside without like a washing machine or something? I don't remember the exact time, but it was late, but still, we ignored it and we kept walking. Suddenly, though, this woman stood up and started walking toward us quickly. She was speaking in an aggressive tone, and it felt like she had been waiting for us almost. At first, we thought that she was talking to somebody else, but she kept coming closer and we couldn't understand a word that she was saying. We were starting to get nervous, and so we turned around and started walking back toward the wedding. But she began following us, her tone getting louder and more aggressive, and she seemed to have picked up her pace now. Max looked behind, and then he tapped me on the shoulder as if to tell me to run. So we ran hard, but then she started running too. We panicked and sprinted as fast as we could. We didn't stop until we reached the wedding area, right under a street lamp. We turned around because we heard her, but she was just gone. Like, just vanished into thin air. We didn't see where she went, but just moments ago she was literally behind us. And we never saw her again after that. Later I asked Max what caused him to signal me to run, and he said that he saw a shadow and apparently it was getting bigger and bigger, and it really freaked him out. Back in college, I think a demonic or at least something evil, an entity, attached itself to me when I was 19. I'm 26 now for reference. It's probably worth a separate story, but I 1000% believe that it was something attached to an old painted portrait of my dorm's founder. Long story short, the portrait had been missing from my dorm, and so I thought that I'd be some sort of a hero and find it to bring it home, which was a huge mistake. That year, many people on my hall had unfortunate and strange experiences. One person, no allergies, went into anaphylactic shock out of nowhere and had to be rushed to the hospital. Doctors couldn't find a cause, and another person was driving a country road at night and hit a cow that had gotten loose. It actually crushed her car and almost her. A separate person got into a car wreck, and another person fell down the stairs and broke their foot. Several other people also had extremely odd and unfortunate tragedies occur that year. But in any case, my dorm was really small. I went to a little university in a farm town, and all the bad things that happened were to people around me, and myself included. People reported objects moving as well, coming back to their dorm rooms to find electronics turned on, trash thrown everywhere, all their desk drawers open, belongings missing, and the sounds of footsteps on the concrete floor on the other side of a door that led to steps, pacing steps that got louder when no one was there on the other side, and just a sense of like a hanging darkness around. I went as far as speaking with a theology professor about it, and even going to the grave of the man in the portrait. He was buried in a cemetery in town, and begging him to stop. Everyone could feel it too. Me and the two other separate people had dreams one night of a misty shadow man standing over us in our sleep as we watched ourselves. One person woke up from their dream to find their dorm room door unlocked and open. And so, as you can probably imagine, I decided at the end of the year to move out, to a separate apartment off of campus. The summer before moving, though, I worked for the school while they had summer camps come through. One time after camp had left, me and another person went to check my old dorm room, routine checks for damage, trash, etc. I went up to my old hall and called out to the entity. Stupid, I know, but I did. And I suddenly heard a loud, rapid banging on a huge metal door at the end of the hall. I have never run so fast in my life, and also never entered the dorm again after that too. The following year, though, many people reported the dorm feeling lighter than normal, like the bad energy left after I moved. My new apartment was better, but objects were still moving. I saw shadows move during the night in the faint lighting from the outdoor lights. Nothing terrible happened, but a presence, for a lack of a better term, continued to remind me that it was there. Then I moved home for a year after graduating. Night terrors and paralysis occurred. Never had that happen before. Objects continued to move, and I was in a bedroom in my dad's basement and felt so uneasy every time that I stayed in there that I could barely be in there. I smelled perfume when there was none. My grandmother had died in my dad's house while in hospice the previous year, and it was definitely hers. I don't believe that it was her spirit, though. After that year, I moved once into an apartment with a roommate as I entered a master's program. Lights would slowly glow on and off with no switches being flipped. Chairs in our kitchen were dragged far out from the table. Loud thudding footsteps that sounded like someone running in our hallway occurred at all hours of the day and the night. I even called a priest that time, who completely dismissed me, but I was just completely fed up. Then I moved into my current house with my fiancée. Things aren't horrible here, but something is still with me. You see, an old handmade broom with a clearly whittled broom handle and thick straw at the end appeared, out of nowhere, in our furnace closet one day. My now husband and I refused to touch it. Sinks will turn on, voices will be heard, smells of perfume when I'm not wearing any. It just really doesn't stop, and I hang rosaries over my bed for some sense of protection. I pray the prayer of protection of St. Michael the Archangel, whatever I can do. I'm exhausted by it, in fact, but it just doesn't seem to stop. Recently, I've heard harsh, raspy voices in my ear when I'm trying to fall asleep that tell me to wake up. My family is sensitive to the paranormal, so I'm not surprised that I'm experiencing things. I believe that it's real. I mean, it's not a matter of denial or anything, but I just wanted to go away, and so that's why I'm here. Will this thing follow me forever, or will it eventually leave me? Or do I need to do something to get rid of it? If you know what to do about these things, then please do let me know, because I just want this to be over. So, when I, female, was around 20, I was newly single and exploring the apps. I matched with this guy named Alex. He wasn't my usual type by any means, but his profile seemed pretty cool. Showed me that he was in school, plus some friends, so he didn't seem weird to me at all. We got to talking and he seemed pretty into me, so we ended up setting up a date. He came to pick me up for a driver date, so basically sit in his car for hours driving around. And yes, I don't know why I did this, but I blame it on being young and stupid. In any case, we started driving and we drove for about 40 minutes all the way to downtown. Mind you, during these 40 minutes, he was blasting music at full volume with the windows down. Everyone on the sidewalk was staring at us while he's screaming the lyrics out of the window. When I brought up the fact that I thought that it was a little bit loud, he said, "Nah, everyone loves it." But I can attest that they in fact do not love it, and I tried to assure him of that. Anyways, we get to the heart of downtown and he parks outside of a very famous and prominent tower in the city and gets down on the ground and just sort of, stares at it. No warning, nothing. This is where I started to think that he was a little bit strange. He then hopped up and said, "Let's go and get some food now." It was really strange. So now we begin driving to get some food, and he drives 2 cities outside of the one that we're in, which means that essentially we've been driving now for like hours. While on this drive, he starts spewing racist stuff as well, and then abruptly tells me that he's very depressed and a troubled person, and asks me if I have ever done the slicey dicey or anything. With this, I was very taken aback and really didn't know what to say. I mean, I've known this man for a few hours at this point, and I didn't think this conversation would get this deep. He confided in me, though, and told me that he had been hospitalized before. And as you can imagine, at this point, the vibe that he was giving off was scary, and I started to feel like I was in danger. But I was even more scared that if I offended him, that something bad could really happen. Let's not forget that I'm in his car. He has my home address as well, and I'm 2 cities now from my own. So I played nice. We finally got to a food spot and ate some dinner. I mean, at least he paid for it, right? But here is where it gets really creepy. So we begin driving again back to our city, but he keeps taking the long way, so our 1-hour drive turns more into like a 3-hour drive. At this point, we're back at the city, but it's really late, around 11:30 p.m. And this is when he goes into a dark neighborhood, and he starts driving very fast around tight roads and corners. As he's doing this, I politely ask him to slow down because he's scaring me, and he turns and looks at me with no emotion and says, "You know, I've had some really bad days in my life." And I said, "I know, I told you. I'm really sorry about that." And then he said, "I used to hurt so bad that I would come and drive my car just like this, and also kill squirrels so something else could hurt as much as I did." I was in shock. I was honestly very terrified with what he had just said, not to mention his strangeness from the start. All I could do was ask if he still did it, and he said no, not anymore. I knew, though, that that wasn't true, but I thought that if I offended him, that he could easily overpower me, so again, I needed to play nice. At this point, we were very close to my home, about 10 minutes. and abruptly he asked if I had been to this park that's coming up or something. This park is at the bottom of a cliff and it's like the middle of the night. I have been to this park, but even if I hadn't, I would have said yes because there's no way that I wanted that man to drive me down there. He then said, "Oh, perfect. I haven't, so you can show me around," and took a right and drove down the very dark road to the bottom of the park. Where the parking lot was, it was completely empty, with about 6 streetlights total. Needless to say, I genuinely thought that I was about to be victim number 1 of this guy. Since I'm here though, I obviously wasn't, but his tone and his mannerisms were so strange while we were there. He then basically forced me to kiss him pretty intimately and got a little bit handsy while I kept pushing him off. It didn't escalate past that, thankfully, and then he drove me home. I blocked his number and all socials after that, but I often wonder if I really did just go on a date with a genuine psychopath. I, female and 31, was alone at work the other night when a customer, M, came walking in through our back door. I thought that it was a bit strange, but I let it go and helped him with his purchase, and we sort of chit-chatted a bit. He's a regular customer, and I get along with him pretty well. Well, he goes to leave and asked me if I wanted to make sure the door that he came through was actually closed this time, and I said yes, please. So he leaves and I hear the door open and close loudly 2 times, as if he was letting me know that he was slamming it closed. I called my boyfriend and put him on speaker to let him know that I was going to be later than usual due to the last-minute customer. We're talking when, all of a sudden, the same customer that I thought had left comes from around the corner of our back room to ask me a follow-up question about something really trivial. I thought that he had left. I have no idea what he was doing back there between the 2 door slams that I heard and me talking on the phone, but he must have just been standing back there for whatever reason. After that, I could not shake the feeling that something bad could have happened to me. 80% of my brain is telling me that I'm just overreacting, that the man wouldn't do anything to me. But then the other 20% just cannot stop wondering what the heck all that was about, and genuinely I'm creeped out. I did tell my boss the next day about it. She had me go and pick up a doorbell from the nearest Lowe's so our delivery drivers can ring it for deliveries because our back door is staying locked from now on. My boss wanted to say something to him the next time that he comes in, but I told her for us to just let it go. We have prevented it from happening again, but my ASM wants to tell him about himself and how he needs to be more self-aware and a lot less comfortable around there. Anyway, the part that I just cannot pass is the pretending to slam the door closed, and also what may have happened had I just walked back there willy-nilly. I am an alcoholic and I've been sober for 9 years now. That is, too, without a doubt, my proudest accomplishment. I started getting help during my sophomore year of high school, and looking back, I'm really grateful for the timing. If I had hit rock bottom later, things would have only have gotten worse. My parents, they actually transferred me to a different school so that I could start fresh and meet some new people. By the time that I turned 18, a few months before graduation, I had already been sober for over 2 years at that stage. That was around the time that I started aging out of most teen recovery programs. A lot of the counselors I worked with only focused on youth cases, so I had to start finding adult support groups at that stage. I grew up in Los Angeles, but not the touristy part. My neighborhood, it had liquor stores every few blocks and corner shops with thick plexiglass windows. Alcoholism was really common and normalized, to be honest. So once the teen programs ended for me, I started going to early morning AA meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They were held in a small church near my school. I did not have first period on those days, so it worked out perfectly for me. After the meetings, I would usually stay for a couple of extra minutes to write in my journal or just sort of sit in the quiet. And one morning, this guy stayed after the meeting and asked me what I was writing. I told him that I was journaling, and he said that he liked the idea and wanted to try it himself. After that, he started sitting next to me at every meeting. We would talk a bit afterward, and honestly, he seemed pretty normal. He was about my age, too. He knew that I was about to graduate as well, and he had asked if I had planned to keep coming to that group during the summer. I told him that I really wasn't sure yet. I had just gotten a job across town and was looking into meetings closer to where I would be working. I could tell that he did not love that answer. Sometimes you can just sort of see the disappointment on people's faces, right? In any case, I used to talk a lot in those meetings, and I did not go just to sit in silence. I brought energy into that room, I think, and I like to think that I helped people feel a little bit better. I think he felt that too, to be honest, and I think that is why he did not want me to leave originally. And look, people have told me that I talk too much, so maybe I'm just flattering myself and everyone else wanted me to be quiet, but I like to think that I was making a difference. He asked again when I would be switching to a different group, and I said that I didn't know yet. I told him that I planned to keep coming through the end of the school year, though, and I don't remember if I ever told him the name of my school, but I always wore a royal blue and gold. He knew that I went to school nearby as well, just around the corner from the church. In other words, it wouldn't have been hard to figure it out. Then, in the last 2 weeks of senior year, everything got, well, really wild. We had senior ditch day, late-night hangouts, sleepovers, goodbye parties, etc. I missed the AA meetings at the church, and then I switched AA groups altogether at some stage. At graduation, everything was great. But that guy showed up. It was so off as well. He did not know me like that. I had never invited him. We were not close like that, but there he was, smiling at me from the back like it was completely normal. He came over afterward and he said that he brought me a gift. It was a box of chocolates and a note about how much he would miss me. He said that I should drop by the meetings again sometime, and I uncomfortably said something like, thanks. I never went back. That whole situation was a bit too weird for me, and really I just didn't want to see him again. But then he showed up at my new job. I was working the cosmetics counter at a big department store. The cosmetics department actually had its own cash register and all that. And the first time that he walked by, I noticed him. Then he came back the next day, and the day after that. He never spoke or asked for any help. He just sort of wandered around near my station, looking over at me like it was no big deal. He didn't even try to be subtle. Eventually, I told one of my co-workers, the type of woman who does not play, and she walked right up to him and asked what he thought that he was doing. She called him out in front of everybody, really, and she said that she knew exactly what he was there for, and that it was creepy and also toxic. A few shoppers turned around to see what was going on. His face turned red and he walked away without saying anything. We told our manager afterward. The manager was glad that we spoke up, but reminded us to let her know right away next time. Thankfully, there was no next time though, since he never did come back. I have not seen him since then, and hopefully he got bored and just moved on. I don't really care to find out what he wanted, but to be stalked like that, it is unsettling. So, before I begin, I want to make some things clear up front. This is ultimately a testimony of what single-handedly turned me to Jesus. 2, every word is 100% the truth and my memory is crystal clear. There is no part of this that is fuzzy to me because it was so traumatic that I cannot nor will ever forget it. 3, I am not here to force belief upon anyone or convert anybody to Christianity or embellish or anything. And 4, I understand bringing religion into this will turn many away, and that's fine. I see this as my own personal truth, and I simply wish to share my experiences because there is a small chance that this will protect others from horrors that they've never experienced. And I genuinely hope that this can be helpful to people like that. So with those things out of the way, I now present my experience with the demonic. So I grew up raised on Christian values, even attending Catholic private school for a couple of years. Despite this, I was a standout problem child, to be honest, and never really believed any of it at all. I found some of the stories from the Bible interesting, but overall detested going to church. Nobody in my family really forced the religion on me, thankfully. I just happened to be within a family that held mild Christian values. With that said, none of them were really devout Christians themselves. And this is important because it should be understood that I was quite aware of Christian beliefs, but never actually took them as truth. Now, jumping forward to my teenage years where all this began. At the age of 12, I was engaged with all things mystical and mysterious. I read books and browsed websites on everything between ancient aliens, conspiracies, ghosts, mediums, witchcraft, Illuminati, and the demonic. This was around 2003 to 2004, so just past the turn of the millennium. All of these things were of great interest to me as well, but I had no actual evidence or reason to believe any of it. It wasn't until my family had made the decision to move that these things became more viable. My parents had locked in on a house that they thought was perfect for us, and were close to closing the deal. My mother wanted her mother, my grandma, to come and approve of it first though. While I ran around the empty rooms, trying to decide where I would have my bedroom, my mother showed my grandmother around, and after the tour was given, my grandmother felt uneasy about the house, specifically the second floor. She apparently didn't like the way that it was set up or something, and worried what would happen if there was a fire while me and my siblings were up there. This wasn't enough reason to deter my mother though, obviously, and after they checked over the potential new home, we proceeded to head back to the car. While on the drive, my mother mentioned to my grandma how she was weirded out though because she could have sworn that she saw a little girl staring at her from the second floor window. This led my parents to investigate the history of this house, and they had found to their amazement that there was in fact a fire on the second floor of this house many years prior, and that a young girl had perished in the flames apparently. Well, with that said, that strange coincidence was not enough to stop them from trying to buy this home. It was actually the fact that upon inspection there was found to be a roach infestation, that my mother would not have any part of that, and this led us to finding our actual new home in another nearby town. This house was approved of much quicker, and had the okay of my grandmother as well. So a couple of busy days go by, and we're pretty much all moved in and set up in our new home. This is when we get a knock on our door. Turns out that it was the woman who previously lived there who sold us the house. She apparently wanted to pass a message on to us, the message being that her mother had died in the house and that she would occasionally appear, but that we shouldn't worry because she was friendly and apparently was just attached to the house. We will keep this on the back burner for now, but cut to a few weeks later. I had made a new best friend who lived right down the street from me. My house number was 112 and his was the number 12. I thought that was pretty cool at the time, but no special meaning there or anything. It wasn't long after that too that I became close with his family, and they in turn became close with my parents, who would regularly visit each other's homes for get-togethers. The first get-together that we had my friend's parents come over, they asked about mine and about the move, and where my parents filled them in on the details. And this is where things got a little bit strange, I guess. You see, to our surprise, my friend's family actually lived in the house that we were looking at prior for a good decade, where they proceeded to say that they moved because that house was incredibly haunted. They said that there were two different ghosts in that house apparently, one which was a young girl and the other a malevolent old man. This genuinely shocked my family, because so far, intuition was on point. My friend had 3 older brothers, 2 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters, one of whom was adopted. They also ran a daycare out of their house too, so as you can imagine it was quite packed on the daily. Each of the older brothers had traumatizing hauntings though that happened to them in that house. The oldest brother, who was 21 at the time, he still wouldn't sleep with the lights off because of it apparently too. This was the first point in my life too where I had seen multiple people confirming and agreeing upon spiritual activities in a real capacity. But now let's jump forward to about the age of 14. Following my same interests, I was fascinated with the ideas of ghosts and spirits. I wanted nothing more than to interact with them in some way or another. But despite the past mentionings, I myself hadn't seen one single shred of their existence at this stage. Quite honestly, it was frustrating too. I tried all manners of contact, bought crystal balls, stared into mirrors in the dark, looked into black ink, researched Enochian, literally everything under the sun, but I just couldn't get anything to work. That is, until I opened a Ouija board on my 15th Christmas. If there is one message to take from this entire thing too, it's to tell you from the bottom of my soul, do not engage with a Ouija board ever. So, I didn't immediately use it, but one day my friend and I were chilling per usual, and I had remembered the new Ouija board that I had gotten for Christmas. I asked him if he wanted to use it with me, and he hesitantly said yes. I made him go down into the basement with me because where else would be the perfect place to use it? I had just opened the box and placed the board when my friend chickened out on me. I mocked him and told him, I'm going to do it by myself then. I placed the little piece on the board and proceeded to ask it questions, but to no avail. Nothing. Again, I was extremely disappointed. Quite honestly, I genuinely thought too for sure that this was going to be it, but no. I put it back in the box, I brought it upstairs, and really that was that. Or so I thought. But boy, was I as wrong as could be. Immediately over the next couple of days, I started experiencing things that were unusual. Simple things at first, like lights being funny, my dogs acting strange, objects and doors moving by themselves. This, however, was spectacular to me at the time. I had no fear whatsoever. If anything, I was extremely excited and more into the occult than ever. I thought that this was it, what I've been waiting for, paranormal activities, finally. These types of things continued for the next couple of years steadily too. And then it finally happened that I saw my first ghost ever. I was 16 at this point and had been making my way from the kitchen through the dining room towards the living room. While I was gapping between the kitchen and the dining room, I saw what I thought was my mother walking towards the kitchen from the connecting hallway. I took note in my peripheral of her pink dress, which threw me off a bit because my mother normally doesn't wear such a thing. It wasn't until I made my way through the dining room to the living room where I saw my mother and father sitting on the couch watching a movie. This instantly made me take 5 because I realized that my mother not only was not wearing a pink dress, but was not in the hallway going to the kitchen. I proclaimed to my parents instantly of the shock and surprise that I was in, but they just straight shrugged it off and continued with the movie that they were watching. I didn't press the issue because I was now elated with the fact that I had actually seen a ghost, and I had instantly presumed it to be the prior owner's deceased mother. I would go on to look at her as a guardian spirit of the house, so to speak, though I never did actually see her again. This event, though, was ultimately a bad thing, because it put me more at ease with the idea of communication with the dead, I guess you could say. I took her spirit as an example of what all spiritual things would be like, which pushed me further into looking for such things. However, over the next 2 years, things progressed from bad to worse. At some stage, I developed insomnia. There would be random spots in the house that would make your blood run cold. Doors would knock over and over again. Things would be thrown out of the closets and off dressers and shelves. One of the more creepier occurrences would be electronics acting without electricity. Dolls would speak their recorded sounds on cue without batteries. I had taken the batteries out of all such things to try and prevent this. Lights would go on and off repeatedly. I even had TVs go white static and start blasting max volume. I would unplug them and it would amazingly stay on and go louder. This genuinely scared me as well. Literally, I get chills through my body even reminiscing about this right now. And to be clear, these weren't things where I could question other possibilities. These things were seen as nothing other than what they were, impossibilities. There was one night in particular too where it clicked, and the fear had taken permanently a hold of me. So I had recently at the time gotten into the Harry Potter books, big reader as a youngster. I was sitting on the couch in my basement, which was now redone as a TV room, where lots of things would happen, and I had one of those little bendy lamps sort of things used for reading books as my only illumination. I was thinking to myself how great these books are and how I thought that it was funny that people at the time thought that they were of the devil. And I kid you not that as I'm in this thought process, the light bulb literally explodes, projecting the glass shards directly at me. Luckily there was no harm done, but I instantly hopped up in fear and ran out of my basement to escape the dark. I flew up the basement stairs where dolls were starting to go off now. Some bins of toys were kept under the stairs, and the fear, it suddenly jolted me. I sprinted even faster and finally opened the basement door and reached for the hallway light switch in front of me, flicking it as quickly as I could. And again, I kid you not, as soon as I did, the hallway bulb exploded. At this point, I'm like, no way this is happening right now. But this happened 2 more times again, in the living room, and once more on the second floor, once I had made my way up those stairs. 4 light bulbs exploded in total. Now, again, I'm quite rational despite these things, and I'm aware that this could be a very coincidental electrical wiring problem, a surge or something like that. But everything that ultimately happened says otherwise. Eventually, I made it to my bedroom on the second floor, where things seemed to normal out a bit and I finally had some light. It was at this point in my life where these experiences were beginning to take a bit of a toll on me, really ramping up my insomnia. I was in constant fear while at home due to these things happening left and right. Some of the things so common that, honestly, I barely batted an eyelash at them. Now, before we get to the big one, I want to give just a few more descriptions of everyday occurrences at this point. So, while laying in bed, I would do everything in my power to avoid looking at my closet, which had a nasty habit of opening wide, so I would be gazing straight into a dark void. And before you say draft, I might add that I would literally blockade it regularly. But no matter what I did, this freaking door would push itself wide open, moving whatever blocked it right out of the way. It got so bad that I tried bargaining with it, telling it that it was free to do what it wanted as long as it wouldn't open on me while I was trying to sleep. I'm 33 now, by the way, and I tell you as a pretty well-rounded adult now that this was not mind tricks. Now, not every night, but quite a few of them, I would feel things crawling beside me onto my bed. Not in the general sense of where your mind is questioning if you're actually feeling it or not, but in the sense that the spring mattresses would literally indent and compress as this invisible force crawled right beside me. Again, as you can imagine, this scared the heck out of me, and I would pretty much literally freeze in fear. The last occurrence that I would see all the time affected other people too. Due to my sleeping problems, I was always the last one to fall asleep, and I witnessed multiple times people's arms being raised in their sleep like they were reaching for the sky or something. There was a day when I had a cousin and 2 friends crashing over, and I watched as one by one their arms raised into the air. It made me feel like whatever this was almost taunting me, showing me that it could do whatever it wanted to whoever it wanted. The real kicker, though, was when I was sleeping on an air mattress in my younger brother's room, 4 years younger than me. I did this because at this point I was so terrified to sleep alone that I needed to be near somebody to feel somewhat safe. And as I was dozing off, I watched my brother's arms raise into the air. The only difference is this time, he actually woke up while it was happening. I watched him groggily realize what was happening to him, and he jumped to his feet, turned, and ran into the wall out of terror and panic. I legit started laughing because I had never seen anything so absurd and shocking in my entire life. I mean, the way his feet moved like an old cartoon, like he was Sonic the Hedgehog or something. The way the blankets jumbled beneath his scurrying feet, and the sheer speed at which he hopped up and darted into the wall. Safe to say, both my brother and I, we didn't get any sleep that night. Now, if you've made it this far, then you understand at this point that whatever is going on has been ramping up and become more bothersome by the day. And this is where we climax. Thank you all for bearing with me to this point as well. I have shared this with people close to me, but never public en masse like this. So I had grown quite brave at this point because of these things, and they were so regular and common, I simply sort of just became used to it, I guess. And so I was able to sleep solo once again. So there I am, lying down on the couch against the furthest back wall in my basement. This was generally where I slept and hung out at this point in life. I had 3 dogs, one of which was a little white chihuahua named Baby. She was the most timid, docile, scaredy cat of a dog that you could ever imagine. Everyone who has pets understands that you sort of come to learn the general behavior of them. And I had just turned off the lights and popped onto my back, where my little baby jumped up to sleep on my chest like she always does. And this is where the single most terrifying thing in my life happened. So Baby instantly goes to alert and stands up growling into the darkness. Mind you, she does not act like this ever. Her fur is raised and her fangs are bared, and I can immediately perceive that this little dog is trying to defend me from something, despite her tiny stature. This puts me on full alert, and I sit up to also peer into the darkness while she's still standing guard on my lap. The next thing that I know, she cowers, her tail goes between her legs, and she whimpers and flees. Before I can gauge what's happening, my arms were literally pinned straight down to my side, and my back was forced straight down onto the couch. And I can see enough to tell all of you with 100% certainty that there was nothing there. But while forced down, it feels as if I was pushed 5 feet through the couch, like my soul was straight pushed out of my body or something. I was so consumed by fear that there wasn't a single thought in my head other than static and panic. Whatever was happening, it probably lasted about 10 seconds, I would say. And as soon as this force let go of me, I hopped straight up in my undies and darted through the darkness towards the stairs. This is the part that I want to make crystal clear too, because this right here is the part that you never want to experience. Those who think that the paranormal and ghosts are cool have not experienced the sensation that I'm about to describe. But I tell you, I felt a tangible hatred that was unlike anything that I had ever felt. It was the feeling of something that hated every fiber of your being and wanted nothing more than to destroy every last bit of you in the most malevolent way possible. It was an inhuman sensation, and it was in this moment that I understood suddenly that hell was real, and that this, whatever it was from there. There was no doubt in my mind anymore, and it was a sense of just knowing absolutely. It was the predator, and now I was the prey. I scrambled room to room in my house, and just like before, every light bulb was shattering. I couldn't escape the darkness no matter how hard I tried. I made it to the 2nd floor and burst into my parents' room screaming. And I swear on everything that they would just not wake up. I mean, I shook them and I yelled, but nothing. I then ran to the only other person in the house at that time, my little brother. But the same thing happened. he just wouldn't wake. It was like trying to shake somebody out of a coma. In all honesty, I was 18 and considering myself a man at this point, and I had lots of pride, but still, this did not stop me from hopping right into my brother's bed next to him and pulling the blanket straight over me. Now, you would think at this point I was safe, right? No. This thing repeated what it did in the basement. It seemed to sort of take hold of my body over and over. I could feel like my mind breaking and my soul dying right in my very body. After the 10th time, I was completely hopeless. I had almost given in to defeat, on the verge of being scared to death and demolished by demons. But this is when I remembered something that I had heard many a time from my Christian upbringing. Pray to Jesus. And I swear to you, on my eternal soul and all that I love and hold dear, at the moment that I cried out, the whole thing just stopped immediately on a dime. 15 years have passed at this point too, and I have not experienced a single thing mentioned ever again. I haven't even come close to getting the feeling that something paranormal is near. Every single bit of the experience literally completely vanished in that moment. And for the next year straight, I started praying at night, spending at least 5 minutes per night before bed going through all of my prayers. Though I don't pray as much, I am every bit as faithful, and if not more at this point in my life too. However, that's not the complete end to this saga. You see, the very next morning I tried my best to explain to my parents what had happened. I cannot say that they fully believed me, but they at least listened enough to help me out a bit. And I thought about how it all seemed to start when I first used that Ouija board, which led me to doing a quick online search on how to dispose of such things, because I didn't want that thing or portal anywhere near me again. It said online that the only way to truly close it too was to burn the Ouija board. So that same day, my parents and I brought it out back and we put it in the fire pit. Now, I must say that I was hasty here and left the bidding to my parents because I didn't even want to look at that thing or be near it anymore. And funnily enough, it was years later when I was regaling the events with my mother where she gave me a bit of surprising news. She proceeded to tell me that she in fact did believe me because that day, unbeknownst to me, that Ouija board just would not burn. She expressed how she and my father doused it with gasoline and that it was still completely unscathed. They ultimately threw it out in the trash can and they watched the dump truck take it away. I figured that must have been good enough though because, again, nothing ever came back. I like to imagine that it eventually got incinerated at the junkyard at some point. And that's pretty much the end of it. But I can still provide one more after happening that I found quite coincidental, I guess. When I was speaking of my mother and father, it was really my mother and stepfather. I say this because when I finally told my blood father this ordeal, he went on to tell me all about how he was severely haunted in his youth too, and similar to me, he was a non-believer who happened to call out to Jesus for help. And while I cannot say for certain, I believe that this led me to believe that there may be in fact some kind of hereditary thing going on here. And like I started out saying, I have not fabricated or embellished even one bit of this. I have pondered the thoughts of such things as mental disorders or something like that. But to that degree, I still have two things to go against that. Number one, after these events I was assessed and doctors have continually found my mental health to be fine. And two, no matter what the cause, it stopped forever on the drop of a dime the moment that I called out to Jesus. There may be a few more times that I'm blanking out on at the moment because, I've been writing this for the past 2 hours or so and I'm getting to the point where my brain is a bit fried, but I am more than happy to take on any answers and questions that you may have. So, if you do have any questions or statements about the above, anything to do with all the information that I've set down here, then please do share it with me because I would love to hear from you all. And thank you for listening. So this story is approximately 10 to 12 years old, and it happened in the Ukraine. When I was 18, just fresh out of school, I had a whole summer in front of me to do whatever I want before starting in university. Through our PE teacher, I got an offer to make some extra money during summer, and I happily agreed. The job was being a counselor at a children's camp for the summer. Basically, I had to watch over them, organizational tasks, hiking, etc. It was my first job and I was happy to make some money for myself. Also, me being 18 and receiving the oldest group, 15 to 16-year-olds, that was a huge bonus to it as well. I was young enough to understand them, but older enough to be respected and listened to. The first shift was pretty mild, really. Not many things were happening, and we were getting used to the job and the kids. I saw something staring at us from the forest. Complaining from the kids was taken not too seriously. We just thought that they were having a hard time getting used to the territory, because most of them were city kids really, and unlike us growing up in the region, they had no idea how active the forest gets during the evening and nighttime. We thought that they had scared off some of the animals that were coming too close to the territory really. Now, about the location itself, it was huge. When you entered through the gate, you could go left or right. On the right were the warehouses, they were at the end of the territory, maybe about a 10-minute walk away, approximately 10 minutes of walking. Also on the right was the canteen, where we would have our meals, and then there was the football field too. Nothing ever really happened on the right side, and even if it did, we could never make it out there for reasons I'll explain in a moment. But if you turn to the left after the entrance, you could see buildings where we and the kids lived. As you turn left, you immediately could see a building where the girls were, and then in the middle was the building for the really small groups, like under 8-year-olds, and on the end was the building for the boys. The three buildings formed a U-shape, with a little garden in the middle, so there's enough space to gather and organize the 150 kids in the morning for breakfast. If you would try to just walk forward from the entrance, maybe about 100 meters in front of you, you would be met with a 2-meter fence and a dense mountain forest that goes up the hill. I know that that's a lot to take in, but the locations are important to have a clear picture of the encounters. So, as I said, the first shift was pretty mild. We didn't really take the complaints from the kids seriously, and then my friend arrived to work with us for the second shift, when the new kids arrived, and that was when it all went absolutely pear-shaped. You see, this friend of mine was a huge chunk more into all paranormal stuff. I knew for sure that his grandma was a weird woman. She always knew when to stay calm and what people were going to do up front, like she was being told ahead of her interactions during the day. She was just always ahead of people. We were neighbors, and so I remember her from a small age, up until I got to like 15 or 16, and sadly she died later. Anyway, this friend of mine probably was educated by his grandma on how to use tarot cards and all that. He was pretty good at it all, and I won't go into details, but he could tell quite a few things about people that he just met and their family and all that, just by throwing a few tarot cards on the table. The day that this friend of mine arrived, we used the cards for fun, and that was when it all started. I believe that he was like throwing fuel on the fire or something. He always gathered people around him, and kids loved him. Extremely strong energy, and even now he has a very warm aura, though he hasn't been practicing anything for years after this story. But it started small. We were woken up on the first night from a scream from the middle house, with the smallest groups. Immediately we ran outside to the kids, and after a few minutes of calming them down, they said that someone was hitting all the windows, like all of them. We're talking about 10 to 12 rooms next to each other and the same amount of windows, really. Around 3 or 4 of them had broken glass in the corner, and we couldn't understand how someone could hit all these windows at the same time, shatter some of the glass, and manage to run away without us noticing it too. It was either 10 plus people involved, or otherwise it was just physically impossible, because we were outside in like 10 seconds or even less. The building is like maybe 30 to 4 meters long, and there's a huge fence right next to it. So even if it was a few people, we probably should have seen them, really. We calmed the kids down though, and we went back to sleep, thinking that we would just deal with it in the morning. But the morning, it wasn't better at all. We were shaken by screaming again. The girls took the younger groups out to do the morning exercise with them, and out of nowhere, an approximately 3 to 4 meter long snake started to hunt them from the garden. It was aggressive too, and absolutely huge. When I say huge, I mean it was massive, at least 2 to 3 times as long as an average person and really thick. So the guys, together with the head of the camp, running around shocked, because in 25 years of management they'd never seen anything like that. Later they told us that even the most dangerous animals are too afraid to get close due to the huge amount of people. But the decision was made on the spot that we needed to get rid of this snake because it was refusing to calm down and was trying to attack the kids. Also, it was only aiming for the small ones, it seemed. The small kids, that is. It didn't seem to care about the grown-ups, like, at all. We found some sturdy sticks and we started to hunt this snake. Finally, we managed to pin it down and it just suddenly died. I mean, we were just holding it down. The plan was to put it in a van and release it on the top of the mountain, but the snake just up and died. My guess is probably from stress, but it was weird. What we did next is low, I know this, but I regret it now, and at that point I was 18 and it sounded like a good idea. So we decided to skin the snake and put the skin on the pole that we had with the flag of our group to encourage the kids to be brave and not to be afraid of the forest. Honestly too, I still believe that that's when the gates of hell pretty much opened. We made something or someone very angry by doing that, and everything just went terribly. Probably a week later, when the first group of kids went home and we were waiting for the new kids, due to it being the second day of the new shift, basically all the kids got their stuff to the buildings and we had an extra night before they would move in. So after spending the day on preparations and helping parents move the bags in, we decided to go to the girls' dorm where the other girls who worked there resided, to have some drinks and have some fun and play some music and all that. This friend of mine was really exhausted, so he went to his bed in our dorm to sleep, and he went with some other guy. They were cutting wood most of the day, so it's understandable that they were pretty tired. For context though, the window of the room in which they were partying was looking straight at the boys' dorm. There was no way the guys could come outside without us noticing them, is what I'm getting at. There were also automatic lights above the door, so we immediately would have noticed the lights going off if they had. Also, don't forget, we're in the mountains, so signal on phones or internet is pretty much inaccessible here. Like, there's basically no signal anywhere. So, it started approximately half an hour after the two guys left. First, we heard someone using the toilet in the end of the corridor. We sort of looked at each other with curiosity, because nobody but us should have been in that building. Everyone was in the room, really. The guys are in the other building and they cannot come to us without us noticing it. Plus, they would have to have knocked on the window or the main door because we had locked all the doors at the time with a key. That's important too. It was part of our job to make sure all of the doors were locked with a key after the sun was down. With or without kids, the dorms always had to be locked. So at that, we got a bit tense, but we didn't hear anything for about 5 minutes, and so we just went back to chatting. 10 minutes passed and the girls literally screamed when someone very fast knocked on the door to the room, then tried to push down the handle. I jumped to the door literally 5 seconds later, fell on my butt along the way, and when I opened it, there was nobody. We ran out to the corridor, checked all the rooms, but there was nothing. The windows were locked, door locked on the key with us in the room. I think this was the moment when we started taking it more seriously too. We sat for a minute thinking about what had just happened, and there was absolute silence in the room. 4 girls and me with another guy. Then the silence got abruptly disturbed by a knock on the window. Just one very heavy knock, like someone slapped his palm on the window and left it there. I immediately jumped at that, waiting there to see one of the guys, thinking that we must have missed them coming outside because we were busy checking the rooms. But I can assure you that there wasn't anyone there. It was now too that I got a very uncomfortable feeling that somebody was watching me from outside. I could see the whole garden in the middle, the forest to the right over the fence, and if I really pushed my face to the window, I could even see the door handle to the building that we've been in. But no living person, no one. I gave a voice to my concerns about being watched, and one of the girls came next to me to look outside. That was the moment that I almost went deaf because she started screaming, "Who are those people?" at the top of her lungs. We calmed her down as much as we could and asked her to tell us what she had seen. She said that there were a lot of people standing outside of the building, all of them looking at us, but she couldn't see the faces because it was around midnight at that point and really dark. She said, though, that she could see their heads turned into our direction and that they were just standing there. I asked her to count them, but every time she reached around 20 to 25, she started crying and having a meltdown from fear. She said that there had to be at least 50 plus of them outside, though. While none of us could see anyone, apparently she did. Now, remember how somebody knocked on the door of the room or the window and we couldn't find anything in the building? We checked all the doors and the windows. Well, suddenly, the main entrance door, that was checked 15 minutes ago. I mean, we made sure of it because 6 people had seen it locked with a key, and the key was in the room with us on the counter. It started erratically with crazy aggression opening and closing over and over again. Somebody was opening wide the door that was locked with a key and slamming it with the power that was shaking the whole building. At this point, even I was screaming, and after maybe a minute of suffering from this unexplainable thing, me and the other guy holding each other's shoulders and running to the entrance to see what was happening there, the sound stopped the moment that we opened the door to go there, and as you've probably guessed already, the door was locked with a key and 2 of us couldn't force it open. We were in shock, to say the least. This was the moment that we decided to seek some help from outside too. We had 2 more people, and my friend and the other guy were sleeping in the dorm across the garden, obviously. They were maybe 40 meters away at most. We had signal, very weak, but it was enough to try and call over and over for my friend. In our head, he was the most experienced with this stuff, and we had some hope that he would know what to do. We must have called probably 30 times in an hour, but there was no answer. In the meantime, the people that the girl had seen were still outside, according to her, and she was seriously freaking out with the other girls while we tried to reach my friend. We couldn't reach him for whatever reason, but eventually, after another 20 minutes, she said that she sees them walking away to the forest, just going through the fence like it wasn't even there. Even for us grown-ups, it was hard to climb that fence. It was really high, and she said, though, that they just went through it. Now, we were in there for quite some time, and in the morning when the sun was coming up, we finally got brave enough to go outside and to go and get my buddy. And he told us a crazy story of his own, too. Apparently, he got up to have some water at around 1 in the morning, looked outside the window to check if we were still up, and saw me in the window, waving to him and showing a thumbs up. I can assure you, though, that that never happened. Also, he said that he should have received some calls, but he never got one. Then he said that when he went back to sleep, just to wake up 30 minutes later from something that he couldn't describe, he said that he sat up in his bed, looked out the window and saw his grandma on the other side. Apparently, she told him to go back to sleep because he cannot go outside now and his friends are going to be fine. She will look after them. He thought that it was a dream, and so he just sort of went back to sleep. That was around the time when the girls said that they started to walk away to the forest as well, allegedly. Also, the phone of my buddy was found in the morning in the middle of the garden. Well, he never left the room and was checking his phone when he woke up the first time, so he definitely had it. Also, he said that he had a strong desire to come to us when he first got up, but he saw me in the window with my thumbs up and decided to stay, believing that we were fine. And so, all in all, when we put together the stories in the morning, we probably got our first white strains of hair from stress, but my friend said we have to apologize. So the next night, me and him went up to the forest. He made a small fire. We burned some herbs and loudly apologized to anything that we disturbed by our actions. And weirdly, after that, nothing really happened. There were some shadows in the forest here and there, some weird sounds in the night, but nothing like before. One of the girls managed to shoot a picture of something white passing in front of one of the windows on a Polaroid, but sadly after our work ended, we didn't keep in contact, so I can't provide the photo. Maybe my friend was still in contact with her or something, and maybe I could retrieve them that way, and if I do, I'll be sure to show it. But in the end, after working there for some time, eventually I left, and it was a crazy time, and all those events that happened that night are something that I'll never forget as long as I live. When I, a 38-year-old male, was 18, I lived in a suburb of southeast Melbourne, Australia, Noble Park. Our house, it was the odd one out. On a street of 70s to 80s brick homes, ours was an Alpine-style weatherboard home with a steep roof built in the early 20th century. It was old, cold, and noisy, and you could see the ground through the gaps in the floorboards even. We had a big dog who stayed outside until everyone was home, and then slept outside in a big pen or doghouse at night, mostly in the summer. We also had an indoor cat. The week that this happened, I was home alone and Dad was overseas. Mum and Sis were visiting family. So one night, when walking home from work, I rounded the corner and noticed a figure standing on our carport roof, looking through a window into one of the 3 upstairs bedrooms. The sun was setting, so all I could see was a dark silhouette. I yelled at it from the top of the driveway, and then it was just gone. I remember thinking that was odd, that my dog didn't bark or notice anything. I went inside and checked the house, the dog, the windows, and the doors, etc. Everything seemed to be in place. I assumed I had just seen a shadow from a nearby tree at sunset or something. The following night, I walked home from work and everything seemed normal. I checked all the windows and the doors, let the dog inside for the evening, and eventually put him and myself to bed. Now, my bedroom was upstairs, down the hall from the room next to the carport roof. But before bed, I had a routine of shutting all the doors in the house, as they were all sort of squeaky and the drafts would often blow them closed if left open. This night, I closed all the doors, checked the locks, turned off all the lights, and eventually I went to sleep. In the middle of the night, though, I was awoken by something. I'm not sure what, but when I came to, I focused my eyes and looked around. I saw the hallway light coming in under my room, and I thought that I had turned that off, but perhaps I had forgotten. Right then, my doorknob started rattling, though, like somebody was struggling to open it. I immediately lay back down on my side, facing the wall opposite my bed, and my heart starts beating hard. I hear the door open, and so I close my eyes. I figured that if someone was breaking in, that my best chance was to pretend that I was asleep and maybe they'll take what they want and just leave. I slowly open one eye, the one against the pillow so it's less obvious. I see the light from the hallway on my wall. My bedroom door is fully open. My heart is beating harder now, and I lay still. I see the digital clock on my CD player, and a little after 2 a.m., then I hear the door creak again and watch as the light on the wall slowly starts to disappear. The bedroom door is closing, and at this point I'm positive we're being robbed, but I continue to pretend that I'm asleep. Keeping one eye open, everything is heightened. The loudest noise is my heartbeat, but I try to listen through it and I can't hear anything. No breathing, no footsteps, nothing. At this point, I begin to feel pressure around both my feet. The blanket is getting tighter around them, and it was then that I realized that something or someone is now sitting at the end of my bed. I look at the clock again, and it's now a little before 3 a.m. I'm frozen, scared, and have no idea what's happening. At some point, I have the idea to slowly readjust my position in bed and move my feet a little to see if something or someone moves or something happens. So I do this, but as I slowly readjust my feet, I feel one of them hit something solid. Something is definitely sitting on the end of my bed. I don't know what to do at this point, so I just stay still and listen while looking through one eye at the clock and the bedroom wall. The next thing that I remember, though, is hearing the first bird starting to chirp before sunrise. I look at the clock and it's now a little before 6 a.m., and I notice that the room is a little brighter. The sun is coming up. Shortly after this, I feel the pressure lift from the end of the bed. I hear the bedroom door open. I see the light from the hallway on the wall again, and then the door shuts and the sun starts to rise. I got up shortly after this, freaked out, and checked the whole house. All the doors and the windows were locked. The dog had slept through the night and nothing from the house was missing. Weirdly though, my cat was stuck in the bathroom overnight. He must have followed me when I brushed my teeth without me noticing and must have got locked in there or something. To this day, I'm really not sure what happened that night, but I sure as heck will never forget that night in Noble Park. So I'm from a not wealthy, you could say, third world country. It's not as bad as it seems, but not as developed as it should be, really. Several times a year I visited my grandparents in the countryside. They had several cows, sheep, chickens, etc. Regular stuff. My uncle, who was 6 years older than me, used to work as a shepherd, in fact. He was about 13 back then, and so he invited me to look after sheep with him sometimes, and I took this opportunity as a bit of an adventure. Now, imagine a green place surrounded by mountains, beautiful scenery. It was almost nighttime, and we put the sheep in circle fencing, made a bonfire and prepared to eat bread, jerky meat and yogurt, and we started talking. You know when you are young and in an open space at night you talk about scary stuff? Well, suddenly, another shepherd who was an elderly person joined us out of nowhere. We didn't mind, especially after finding out that he had sausages and many other delicious things with him. Surrounded by a bonfire in fresh air with stars as visible as the palm of your hand, it was very picturesque, when suddenly this elderly person asked if we believe in the shaitan or the devil. I said yes, and my uncle said no. He then proceeded to say, about 2 months ago, I was herding my sheep. Usually when you herd them, there are always goats in the front. They are like the leaders of the sheep, really. They eat better grass, drink cleaner water, etc. He was explaining. My uncle then said, those are obvious things, so what are you talking about? But he then said, one goat was acting kind of weird, behind the sheep, never joined the other goats and ignored any commands. Funny thing is, my dog and horse were acting as if the goat was a snake. They didn't come near it and tried to avoid it, so I got off my horse, looked closer at the goat, and realized the goat wasn't from my herd. I said what the heck to this and tried to find any labels on it. Amazingly, this goat was white as snow and didn't have any labels or marks. Usually sheep and goats have labels on their ears like earrings sort of thing. But when I tried to look even closer to it, it actually bit me. After that I got pretty angry and kicked it, and suddenly sort of lost consciousness. Everything was sort of blurry, but I swear to you that I saw the goat get up, shake itself off, and walk away on 2 legs. Nobody believed me, and it's kind of difficult for me to look after goats now because I'm sort of afraid of them. After his words, my uncle and I were a little bit shook. Like, I mean, what the heck, right? Why did you even tell us that story before nighttime? We didn't sleep well that night, and we never went too close to the goats of his flock either. But what do you think? Do you think that he was telling us the truth, or was he under some kind of influence? Was he just saying this to scare us? He seemed legitimate. He seemed like he believed his own story. I really don't know what to think about that guy and his story, but something about it just really had me shook. I fell asleep on the couch pretty early last night, 10:30ish. Usually, my significant other wakes me up and tells me to go to bed. However, we got into an argument earlier in the evening, and I think he was like, I'm leaving her out there. Well, a bit after midnight, I heard 3 loud stomps, and this scared me half to death, so I woke up immediately. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw one of my dog's toys floating about 4 feet above the floor, a small lamb chop plushie with all of the stuffing ripped out. It was rotating a tiny bit and then was entirely still for a second. Then it started to slowly lower itself onto the floor. As soon as it was on the floor, I looked over at my dog, and we both ran to the bedroom. I got into bed. My significant other was awake, and I said, "There's something in the living room." He looked at me and pretty much brushed me off and told me to go to bed. It took me forever to calm down enough to fall asleep, and then I repeatedly woke up through the night. I kept thinking, or dreaming, about someone holding the dog toy, realizing that I was looking at them and then them slowly putting it down. In other words, I was really uneasy all night. I told my significant other about it in the morning before going to work, but he just said something along the lines of, "That's so weird," and then proceeded to take our dog outside to go potty. I didn't push the subject because I was so freaked out and also exhausted because I hardly slept. Fast forward to around 10:30ish this morning though, I texted my significant other and was like, "Did you get what I was saying about the creepy thing?" And he responded with, "Yes, the bed was shaking before you came in." I said, "You're lying," but he swore up and down that he was telling the truth. I also texted my siblings in our group chat, and they gave the usual, "Oh my goodness, so creepy" responses. But one of my sisters said, "3 loud stomps to mock the Holy Trinity," and I wasn't sure what she meant. I mean, I'm not religious at all, but I googled it, and I guess 3 loud stomps, knocks, or thumps represent demonic presences in Christianity. I got chills all over as I read that. This entire time, I've felt like the 3 loud stomps were from downstairs. I live above a bar, so that part of the experience didn't really scare me too much. I also was thinking that maybe I was just hallucinating since I was only awake for half a second before I saw what I saw. It was the floating dog toy that scared the living heck out of me. And for a while, I felt like everything that I experienced was purposeful and maybe even evil. My significant other and I thought that maybe we had invited evil into the apartment because we had been watching and listening to nothing but horror stuff due to it being October. We also think that our argument maybe caused a lot of negative energy as well, that maybe allowed what was already present to manifest itself the way that it did. At this point though, I feel like maybe I was just hallucinating because I woke up so suddenly, and maybe the bed was shaking due to movement downstairs. I don't believe in ghosts, demons, the afterlife, but I feel like life would be more meaningful if I did. It was early September in central Idaho, and fall had begun to paint the Lemmy mountain range in flecks of amber and crimson among the sea of pine forests. The air was crisp, carrying that chill that signaled the start of elk hunting season. To find the best herds in this area of Idaho at this time of year, you have to climb high, really high. During the summer, elk favor the high elevation pine forests, where the vegetation is lusher and the temperatures cooler than the sagebrush valley below. As winter caps the ranges in blankets of snow, the elk slowly migrate to the valley floor. It's the animal's natural cycle and one predictable enough to help look for them during hunting season. Over Labor Day weekend, my closest 2 friends, Tyson and John, and I decided to take a week off work to hunt elk in the Lemmy Range. We'd been friends since childhood, but life had a way of pulling us apart. Families, careers, responsibilities. This trip was our chance to reconnect, to revisit the camaraderie that we'd always cherished. We loaded Tyson's truck and drove for over an hour northwest from Idaho Falls into the heart of Idaho's remote central mountains. We turned off the little 2-lane highway, the one that snakes up the little Lost Valley, until we got to a familiar turnoff and headed up an old Forest Service road, FS 126. That little dusty road, no bigger than a dirt path, winds and curves through an unnamed canyon into the heart of the mountains. The Forest Service has long since let the road fall into disrepair, but we navigated a couple of washed out sections at the base of the canyon, and once we were up beyond the tree line, the road was more solid. It was slow going through though. The way was littered with fallen rocks and tangled tree limbs that continually blocked our path. After stopping every few minutes to clear the debris, John and I decided to hike ahead, removing obstacles while Tyson navigated the truck behind us. It was a long climb up the switchbacks to the top, but as we reached the ridgetop, the remnants of an old mining claim came into view. Cleared and flattened back in the 1960s, the site now served as an ideal base camp. We set up our tents and kindled a fire just as the sun began to descend, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground. Gathered around the flames, we lost ourselves in conversation. We reminisced about old adventures and shared new stories about our kids and jobs. I swear we must have been laughing the whole time. The stars emerged one by one, punctuating the deepening darkness of the sky. The world was still and at peace. Suddenly, though, John raised a hand, his expression turning serious. "Did you hear that?" he said. We all fell silent, the crackling of the fire punctuating the quiet night. Then I heard it too, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching through the underbrush. They were deliberate and unhurried, obviously drawing closer with each passing moment. We exchanged glances, a mixture of curiosity and caution. Perhaps a deer, we thought, or maybe a bear wandering nearby. But then, emerging from behind the veil of pine trees, a man stepped into the circle of firelight. We froze. He approached us as if strolling into a neighborhood bar. His walk was casual, his demeanor affable. A bright smile spread across his face. We were totally caught off guard and watched him approach in silence. His hair was disheveled, and he had thick stubble across his face, like he hadn't seen a bathroom in weeks. He was dressed in a well-fitting tailored suit, oddly pristine for someone trekking through the wilderness. The style was decades out of fashion. The seams were subtly frayed. What caught our attention most, though, were his shoes. White sneakers, spotless and unscuffed, improbably clean given the circumstances. It was like he walked out of his house and right into our camp. "Evening, gentlemen," he greeted us with a smile and a nod. In the shifting firelight, his age seemed ambiguous to me. What I mean is that he could have been 30 or maybe even 50. "Evening," we all replied hesitantly. "I'm Mike," he offered, taking a seat on a fallen log without invitation. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" "Sure is," Tyson replied with a slight waver. It made me feel a little better knowing my friends were just as bewildered about this situation as I was. We engaged in small talk, though the conversation felt forced. Mike mentioned that he was an accountant with a family, but when we asked for details, he either ignored the question or would wave it away dismissively, as if swatting at a persistent mosquito. What threw me off was his mispronunciation of his supposed hometown's name, though. He called it Boise and not Boise. That didn't sit well with me. It was like he was reciting lines from a script and was unable or unwilling to deviate and improvise. When he wasn't talking, he hummed a tune softly, swaying ever so slightly. His gaze drifted, not quite meeting ours, often focusing just beyond us into the darkness. It felt as if he were expecting someone or something to appear from the shadows almost. If he felt uneasy or worried about something, he certainly didn't show it on his happy face, though. Tyson finally broke the uneasy rhythm. "So, you out here camping alone?" he asked. Mike seemed momentarily puzzled, then smiled broadly. "Oh, just enjoying the wilderness," he replied. "You know, if something awful were to happen out here, it'd be a long time before anyone found out. This county's the size of Delaware, and they've only got 6 sheriff's deputies." He then chuckled, the sound hollow. An uncomfortable silence settled over us. John shot me a glance that mirrored my own unease. "Huh, is that so?" I managed to say. "Yep," Mike continued, gazing up at the canopy of the stars. "We're a long, long way from anywhere." His mood shifted abruptly, the jovial facade slipping into a vacant stare. The firelight cast eerie shadows across his face, deepening the lines and hollowing his features. "Hey, are you feeling alright?" John asked, truly worried about the guy. He snapped back into reality. That smile returned. "Never better," he assured us. "Don't worry, I'm not crazy or anything, boys. Not a murderer or a demon or anything." He sort of laughed lightly at this, but there was an unsettling edge to it. Tyson's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Look, man, are you on something? You're acting kind of strange." Mike ignored the question, humming that same little melody. The sway returned, his eyes distant. I decided now that it was time to wrap things up. I tried the only method that made sense in the moment. Standing, I slapped my knee in that old Idaho way. "Well, it's getting late," I said, forcing a smile. "We've got an early morning ahead." Mike nodded slowly. "Yes, lots to do." As he stood, a large hunting knife slipped from his jacket pocket, landing blade first into the soil. "Oops," he said casually, retrieving it. "Can't forget this. You never know what kind of crazy folks you might run into way out here, you know." We watched in tense silence as he slid the knife back into his pocket. His gaze swept over us one last time, still not quite meeting our eyes. "You boys take care now," he said, softly. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the darkness, the sound of his footsteps fading into the quiet of the night. We stood there, the fire casting long shadows, the weight of the encounter settling upon us. Sleep, it didn't come easily that night. Every rustle of the wind, every creak of the trees seemed amplified, our senses tuned to the slightest disturbance. The next morning, we debated whether to pack up and leave, but ultimately decided to stay. We had come here to reconnect after all, and weren't about to let one strange encounter ruin our trip. Yet, as we hiked through the mountains in search of elk, we just couldn't shake the feeling of being watched the whole time. We never did see Mike again, but his presence certainly lingered. An unspoken question hanging in the crisp mountain air above us. Who was he? What had brought him to our camp that night? Where did he go? We'll probably never know the truth, unfortunately. I grew up in a small town, primarily Hispanic, where everyone knew everything. We had something here and there, of course, but other than that, not too much stuff happens. I'm overweight, to put it simply, and not to the standards of beauty, really. I remember reading a meme online once where it was a joke about "can't catch me or kidnap since you can't carry me, keep eating cake," and laughed at that and was like, so true. I didn't realize that would all come back and bite me, though. I was 18 to 19-ish, I believe anyway, and it was nighttime. My weed plug was doing a stash and dash, and being broke and desperate, I went for it. I figured I grew up here and I know all the areas pretty well, and what made this more tempting too was that it was actually not far from my area at all. So I said, to heck with it. I was on a video call with my boyfriend and told him that I was going to go for it. He stays on the phone with me and I head out. Mind you, it's late. The areas that I have to cross through are not well lit, and I leave with nothing on me. Not even my taser, alarm, and pepper spray my dad always made me have. Oh, and to make things worse too, I snuck out because I didn't want my dad to know that I was hunting for weed. So this is already starting out great, right? But I set off. I have to cross railroad tracks to get through to the area, which is pitch black, only the main road in the distance lighting it up, and some lights from a warehouse nearby. But other than that, it's pretty hard to see. I make my way towards the main road and notice a semi parked on the side of the road. Not unusual. Semis parked there all the time, ever since I was little in fact, so nothing too weird. Then I hear a holler or hey, and I look over there and see a man in a semi-truck. He looked generic. I'm not gonna lie, a Mexican man with a red long sleeve. He looked like any other man that I'd seen around town. But his smile, I don't know, it just seemed a bit off. In any case, I waved, being polite. He gestured for me to come over and start speaking Spanish, but I don't know Spanish. I know what you're thinking. 1, why don't you know Spanish if you grew up in a Hispanic town? And 2, why aren't you running? My parents never taught me, so sue me. And 2, he was far, so I just kept walking. So I just sort of sheepishly respond, I don't speak Spanish, in Spanish. I learned that phrase just to say it to people, and wave him off quickly, walking away. My boyfriend asks me who's that, and I just tell him some random semi-truck driver. I go on with the night. I think I've been out for 40 minutes at this point, and realize that I'm not going to find it. Big sad, right? So I start heading home, still on the phone with my boyfriend. I keep talking and my phone is dying, which is actually what made my boyfriend tell me to go home. So I start walking back and I go down the road and look down the pitch black area where the railroad is, and I stopped. I just had a bad feeling all of a sudden. Something told me not to go home just yet. I tell my boyfriend that I'm going to go look at the other end of the street. That was towards where the warehouse was, giving off the light and passing empty trailers partially hidden by the shadows. I start walking and make it into the light, and I hear movement behind me and a hey. I turned around really quick and saw the same semi-truck driver again, with the same smile that he had before. He came out from behind a trailer that he was apparently hiding behind. He had his right hand tucked into his pocket, and was positioning his body to where he was hiding whatever that he had more. He told me to come here, and started getting closer to me. I immediately told my boyfriend to wake up his dad and come to get me. I backed up quick and was trying really hard to think of what to do next. He saw me on the phone and immediately had a mad and annoyed look on his face. He stopped and actually started hiding behind the trailers more. Seeing that, I book it down the road telling my boyfriend to come and get me or have his dad come and get me. I didn't want to call my dad because even in this moment for some reason I was still terrified of getting caught sneaking out. I ran across the main road to the little mini-mart across the street and hid behind an ice machine. I told my boyfriend that I need to call someone and hang up on him and call my friend who, thank God, was out with his girlfriend. I tell him that I'm in danger and need him to come and get me, and then I tell him where I'm at. Now, while I was waiting for them, I stayed behind the ice machine, and while I was waiting there, I saw this guy Semi again. I saw him looking around for me and shake his head in disappointment before driving off. Even in that moment, I still didn't feel safe, not until my friend pulled up anyway. Everything just sort of hit me too once he got out of the car, and I hugged him crying. His girlfriend and him calmed me down and took me home. I got a little bit of a lecture from my boyfriend, but I'd rather take that lecture than anything else I could have experienced that night. I was lucky, way too lucky. The false sense of security my weight and looks gave me really shattered after that too, and I'm glad for it. But I won't lie, it still terrifies me to think of just how things could have turned out if I didn't have my boyfriend on the phone with me that night. So this happened around a year ago, but I wrote this out in my notes around an hour after it had happened and forgot to share it. So my mum, stepdad and I, we're driving about 2.5 to 3 hours away to pick up our new motorhome. We stopped at the gas station and I ran inside with Mum to grab some food while my stepdad filled the motorhome with gas. Mum went to speak with him and I dropped my stuff off in the car and then went around to find her as she came around to find me. I came around the back of the motorhome and heard Mum say, "Why are you hiding?" And I assumed that she was talking to the dog in the car. I started sneezing. Sunlight makes me sneeze sometimes, I don't know why. And Mum turned to look at me. Her eyes got wide though, and she looked totally freaked out. I was confused and asked what had happened, assuming the dog was being weird. I got into the front seat as Mum did that weird stress sort of panicked laugh cry thing, and this is the conversation that ensued. "Mum, what happened? What did she, the dog, do?" Mum didn't say anything, just sort of looked freaked. "What is it? Was Ripley being weird?" "No, you." "What? Why? I saw you in the back seat." Apparently, Mum got to the car and saw me laying on the floor of the back seat, grinning up at her like I was being goofy and trying to scare her. The "why are you hiding" comment was directed towards me when she heard me sneezing. And she turned and she saw me, and her eyes got wide and she whipped back around to see that the me in the back seat had actually vanished. Mum, rightly so too, started crying because, yeah, that's freaky, right? I mean, imagine seeing a child in the backseat, being a little weirdo with a grin that doesn't seem menacing, but then hearing that same child in a different location and looking back to see the child in the car was now gone. The smile went from a "ha-ha, I'm so weird" to very menacing apparently and scary, she said. The other occurrence was similar too, this time involving my brother R, who was 16. This was a couple of months back, in fact. The details are a bit foggy, so bear with me. My brother was in the living room when I came out of my room and stopped in the door to the living room. He and I chatted for a minute, with him looking at me as we did. He looked down at his phone when it dawned on him that I had actually left over an hour before to go to the store. I wasn't home, in other words. He looked back up, and apparently I was gone. Around 20-ish minutes later, I returned home and he was still there, a little freaked out. He told me and we were very confused as to what it could have been. On top of that, I've heard my family calling me numerous times, only to find that they haven't. The most notable involving R and Mum as well. One night I was at my desk and heard R call my name, so I got up going to his room to see what he wanted. He said though that he didn't call me, but we stood talking for a minute. I turned on my heel to leave, and as I did, heard Mum call my nickname, Monkey. So I did a 180 heading to her room. But when I went in, she said that she hadn't called me either. It was memorable since it happened twice in a matter of minutes. I do know that we have at least 2 spirits in my house, one attached to my mum and one to me. Nothing has ever seemed hostile. I mean, the worst thing that they have done is move stuff around, which has made me late a few times, I'll admit, but apart from this, nothing else really sinister has happened, so I can only guess that, well, they're not evil or anything. This happened a few years back, but it stuck with me because of how weird and scary it was. So every year for the past few years, my parents have been going on a week-long anniversary trip, leaving me home alone. I was 20, so it was more than an appropriate age. And well, this time around, some weird stuff happened the first day that they were gone, and then this happened the night before they were supposed to come home. So the first day they were gone, a guy came to the door to drop something off in the morning, but I didn't want to answer it as it was a stranger, and I thought that he would just leave it at the door like usual. Well, he stayed for about 5 minutes, and then got into his car and started to drive off, to which I went outside because I thought that he'd finally left it. This man, though, got out of his car, leaving it in the middle of the road, just to give me my package that I didn't have to sign for at all. No signature needed for anything. Wasn't dressed like a delivery person. Was in a beat-up car. Very weird and uncomfortable for sure. Anyway, skipping to the end of the week, I was just chilling out in my living room, and all of a sudden at like 11 at night, I see this rather large figure approach my front door. The glass is dimpled, so you can't see features but just a silhouette, and starts banging on my door, and he did so for like a minute straight. He stands there and doesn't leave for probably 10 minutes, and in the time, he just beats on the door a few times over. Luckily, my sister and her family live not even a mile away from me, so I call them and her husband comes to get me. By this time, I'm in full panic mode and I realize that my dogs are in the backyard. My back door is like 90% glass, and I was horrified that this person was going to come through the back gate and try to come into my house as my dogs were barking up a storm. Anyways, I get my dogs inside the house and my brother-in-law finally shows up, and whoever was there was now gone. He takes me to my sister's house and we check the front door cameras to see who was there. But the cameras, they had been turned off the whole time that this person was there, and for an hour before he started banging on my door. Which was weird because the cameras had been on before that time period and during the time that we were looking at the cameras. But they were somehow shut off for about an hour and a half, which was odd because they're not the type that needs to be charged and they've never glitched before then. But we're actually very sensitive to any movement, really. To this day, I still don't know who it was that showed up at the house that night. I checked the local news and everything, but nothing ever really came of it. I don't know if they were trying to rob my house or if they had other plans, or if it was potentially the weird delivery guy from earlier that week, but it still freaks me out to think about it, and I hate being home alone at night now because of it. Truth be told, I'm not sure what this is. Maybe a mimic, a ghost. I'm not really sure, but maybe someone out there can tell me what they think. This happened several years ago. My sister and her husband were going on vacation for a few days and asked me to dog sit for them. They have quite a few dogs. I agreed as I've dog sat for them a number of times before then and since then too. The first night I stayed over that week, their rather elderly yellow lab, Lacey, started to get a little bit agitated. It was about 10 p.m. and I thought maybe Lacey was nervous because it was close to bedtime and my sister and brother-in-law weren't home. As I mentioned, Lacey was elderly and going blind and deaf, and I thought that she might be having some separation anxiety. I tried to reassure her, and I figured that sticking to her usual routine as much as possible would help calm her nerves a bit. She usually slept in their bedroom, so I was trying to coax her in there to go to bed. I said, "Come on, Lacey, go lay down." I said something similar in a calming tone several times, but after the final time, I heard a voice repeat back to me, "Go lay down." It was a man's voice, and it was crystal clear. It was so clear, in fact, that for a second I thought maybe my sister and her husband had come home early. But then I realized that I would have heard the garage door open. They always use the garage door instead of the front door to go in and out of the house. Plus, the other dogs would have lit up with barking excitement if they had walked in. I looked around and nobody was there. Like I said too, I have dog sat for them many times, and that is the only time I have ever experienced anything like that. To this day, I still don't know what it was. I'm not typically a believer in the paranormal or anything, but I just cannot explain it. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I would estimate I was 15 or 16, living in Golden, Colorado at the time. I spent a lot of time with my good friend Kat, who lived in a double-wide trailer with her mum, Chris. When I first met them, they had a roommate renting their spare room, but after he moved out, it turned into a bit of a hobby supply dumping ground for a while. It was a nice-sized room with an attached bathroom, so Chris eventually dedicated a few days to getting things organized, moving in a twin-size bed and old TV, and making it a functional guest room. What had previously been mountains of fabric and uncontained bobbins of thread, random boxes of buttons and free-roaming skeins of yarn, was suddenly a clean and inviting bedroom with a closet of neatly labeled boxes and drawers, everything folded and in its own predetermined place. Chris was so excited to show it off to me, as she knew that I would be the person sleeping in there most frequently, and it was a great upgrade from either the couch or the floor of Kat's room. Now, when Kat and I had sleepovers, our favorite pastime was to stay up late getting good and creeped out. Slender Man was first gaining popularity in creepypastas, Marble Hornets was being released on the Tube of You, and we were falling down the rabbit hole, not quite sure whether it was all made up or if there was some truth to the stories and sightings being frequently recounted all over the internet. But this was the first night that I would have to pick myself up after our fright fest and go sleep alone in the newly appointed guest room. It had gotten late that night. We had run out of new creepy online videos, and we had even played a few rounds of the recently released Slender game on her laptop. Much as I didn't want to, it was time for bed, and so I went across the hall, climbed into the slightly squeaky metal-framed bed, and took a few deep breaths to help calm myself asleep. My eyes were closed, and my body was starting to relax. But that was when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps creaking across the floor inside of my room. My hair immediately stood up on end, all over my arms, and I could feel the familiar tingle of adrenaline in the nape of my neck. My eyes, they flew back open, and I put my glasses on because I felt too vulnerable to be blind in that moment. I scanned the room in the dim light from the street lamp coming from the window, and I saw nothing. Yet the sounds of the footsteps continued, uninterrupted and more distinguishable than ever. They started near the door, made their way diagonally through the room to the small table where the boxy 1980s TV was set up, paused, moved from the TV to the doorless closet, paused again. To my building sense of dread, the steps then came forward to me, getting closer until I could feel the energy of someone standing directly next to the bed and gazing at me curiously. Then they moved on, walking over to a giant teddy bear propped against a wall in his very own chair, pause, before going back over to the TV and beginning to repeat the same round that they had just completed. In complete shock and amazement, I realized that I couldn't possibly be imagining this, as the steps made the same rotation throughout the room, at least 2 or 3 or more full times, always pausing at each location, including right next to me, which was my least favorite, and exuding an energy of curiosity. The footsteps sounded small and light, the stride short enough that it required 3 or 4 steps every time the being moved only a few feet in any direction. I was on edge at the oddness of this experience, but there was no negative energy coming from the being as it traipsed about the room. I suddenly realized that I simply knew it was a child, curious about the changes in the room and taking its time to check out all the new fixtures in the space, including me. I also knew that I couldn't stare at nothing all night. Following the path of the child, I could hear but not see, so I finally took my glasses back off and tried to lay back down, thinking that if I ignored it and let it satisfy its curiosity, then the discomforting noises would eventually stop. Well, they didn't. With all the boundless energy and determination of a child, the creaks continued their repetitive journey around the room, so consistently that I could very soon predict where they would be next, how many steps it would take to get there, and how long they would pause to stare at whatever was in front of them before moving again to the next station. I was no longer scared, but neither could I relax. I felt foolish even as I fixed my mouth to speak, but I decided to address the entity out loud. I know things are suddenly very different in here and you're just trying to check everything out, but it's also the middle of the night and I can't sleep with you making all this noise in here. Could you please stop for the night so I can get some rest? Finally, all the heightened energy just left the room. My hairs laid back down and my neck stopped tingling, and I heard only silence. I got comfortable in the bed again, took a few more deep breaths to resettle my nervous system, and soon I fell asleep. The next morning, I was in the living room eating breakfast and telling Kat and Chris all about my experience the night before. My mum was going to arrive to pick me up soon, so I was finishing my story. I had stood up and made my way to the entrance of the hallway so that I could go back to the guest room and grab my overnight bag. I was facing them, telling them how I had finally gotten some peace and quiet, then pivoted to walk up the hall. Well, that had been the intention, but all I could do was turn before I was stopped in my tracks, unable to take a single step forward, because standing directly in front of me was a little girl. She looked solid and real though, and I would have thought a random neighborhood kid had found her way into the trailer, except she was all in grayscale. I would guess that she would have been about 6 or 7 years old, and wearing a dress with a little white square apron that belonged in the late 1910s or early 20s. Her hair was straight and jaw length, and I could tell that she was a dark blonde with a small ribbon bow on one side of her head that I knew was pale blue, in spite of not actually seeing any color on her. She looked up at me with a sweet small smile on her face and a twinkle in her eye, and then said, "I know you can see me, and I know you were just talking about my visit last night." She stood there in front of me for a good couple of seconds, before turning to the side and leaning forward to follow a cat that I couldn't see, allegedly, trying to scoop up something at least, and she walked after it, directly through the wall. In shock, I slowly turned back around to face Kat and Chris again. They could both tell that something had transpired, and I know that I had a look on my face that was half grin and half stunned disbelief. "What just happened?" Chris asked excitedly. "You probably won't even believe me if I tell you," I gasped out. "We will. We know this house is weird. What was it?" she insisted. I then described the girl. "I knew it, Kat. Didn't I always say it felt like there was a little girl in here? I've been saying that for years," Chris screamed. Kat sort of chuckled and nodded, begrudgingly admitting that yes, Kat had said that many times before. By now, my mum would be showing up any minute, so I went to the back room, gathered up my pajamas and toothbrush, and quietly said a goodbye to this little girl. "You can come visit me again if you want, just not in the middle of the night next time, okay?" I said to the empty room, feeling a little stupid. And though I stayed many more nights in that home, I never did see or hear from that little girl ever again. I still feel extremely confused, honestly. It was 2017, so quite a few years ago at this point, but I still to this day cannot wrap my head around it. I was about 11, maybe 12 at the time, 19 now. It was around 7:40 in the morning and the sun was out and shining bright on a weekday. My mum and I were driving to school when just a minute passed by my house. We were coming up to the railroad tracks, which we did every day, except this morning we saw a man walking. I didn't think too much of it, except that it was odd that he was wearing all black. Black jeans, black zip-up hoodie, black shoes. He was bent over seemingly when we were just starting to see the figure, and then it stood up and I think it had hands in its pockets. He was walking on the left side of the road, off onto some grass with his hoodie up over his head. He began to walk, but as we got close, he whipped his head around and looked at us. I expected to see a guy's face, but instead, I saw nothing but pure blackness, darkness, a shadow where a face should be. I was staring in disbelief. The thing seemed to be scared oddly and began running. I have no idea why. Even then, I was so confused. But it ran for a few seconds, which seemed like a while to be seeing what I was seeing. And then, it just slid down onto the grass on its butt and leaned on its right side and hopped off like it would on a ledge. Mum kept driving slowly and we watched the figure disappear just into the ground. We both stared at the place where it went and it was just gone. A second later, as we finally began to go over the tracks, I uttered, "Mum?" And she looked over at me and just said, "I don't know," and asked if she saw it, and she just said, yeah, I saw it." And then we both just sat there, I guess, thinking. In this experience, I didn't feel threatened or anything. I didn't feel like it was planning to harm us, but it was so confusing. Why did it not have a face? Why did it run like that? Why did it act like we weren't supposed to be able to see it either? Why did it go into the ground like that? Why was it wearing such stereotypical stalker or robber or scary man clothes? Does it mean hell is real? Did it go there? Or was it a demon? I've never even been a believer in the paranormal. I've always rejected the idea of God or religion in general, and I still can't get into that sort of stuff. As time went on, though, I kind of ignored this memory, I guess. I ignored how it affected me. I now recently have been thinking about it again, and I just cannot wrap my head around it. I know that I'm not crazy because my mum saw it too and can describe it the same as I do. I just can't comprehend how it was real. But it was just as real as any other person walking on the street. I don't know why I'm sharing this, to be honest. I just need someone to relate to about this, I guess. I've been feeling emotional about it lately. So, is there anyone out there who can maybe help me understand this? Anyone else experience something similar? I've been to the spot multiple times since then, and I've never seen anything again. I haven't seen anything paranormal since, in fact. I don't know what to think about any of this, and it means a lot to me to not feel so alone and confused in this experience, and sometimes life in general, I guess. I guess I just don't know how to process there being other things like this. When I was 11, we first moved to California near the Yosemite area. Lots of forest and small lakes near where I lived. I moved right around when summer was ending and school was starting, so I took a bit to get settled and used to everything. Summer rolled around the next year. My family is pushing me to get out of the house and do something besides staying inside and playing games all day. There was a lake with lots of dirt paths and such that was easy to explore, so I'd go around there a bit and just walk around, especially this one spot that had a cool little waterfall into a smaller lake from the bigger lake of that area. And well, one of those days I'm walking to the lake and I spot someone by the waterfall. She's a girl around maybe my age, orange hair, freckles, and an accent that I wasn't able to understand at the time, which I think was a Tennessee accent. I've always been horrible with names, but I remember her name being a very common one, something like Alice or Cassie or something like that. As a young kid, I never really had crushes on girls. Most of the time, if I was friends with someone, them being a guy or a girl, it didn't really change much in how I interacted with them. And she was definitely the same way because we immediately got along. I remember us going to the lake and just walking around a lot. I talked a lot about living in Washington, what school was like, and video games, something that I could tell went right over her head. She said that she was visiting her grandma over the summer at a house down the road from mine. I remember I had her number saved, so I'd text her whenever I was planning to go on a walk, and she'd meet me at the end of the driveway of the house that she was at. I remember her saying her grandma didn't want her going to my place, which was understandable. I mean, I'm a stranger to this woman, and so would my family be. But Alice didn't want me to come visit the grandma either, which I remember finding a bit weird. I remember my friend Eric, who lived near the lake, would always come by, and wanted to come with me to walk around, and Alice told me that she'd rather it just be the two of us. Maybe it was because she didn't know him, but she would only come with me on those walks alone. I remember one time we walked out a bit further than usual on one of those dirt paths. This one was a bit awkward because of a hidden incline on this hill, and she'd have to pull me up for us to walk around and jump down when we walked back. Anyway, cut to near the end of summer, and she's still hanging out with me, even meeting me at the end of my driveway. I remember one time I was having trouble finding my jeans, so I didn't get cut by the bushes that we walked past all the time, and told my mum before she went to work to tell Alice that I was going to be a little bit late. I'll explain in a bit why this is important as well, but on our last day walking around, we went to the rock that kind of overlooked the lake, and we just kind of sat there. I remember she was talking about her family and how much she preferred being there in California than where she was from. Something I don't remember though is if she ever told me specifically or not. And well, I said bye to her and said that I'd try to meet her at her house before she took off. I never did. I think I was forced to go school shopping or something that day, so I sent her a text telling her, and she didn't seem upset or anything. I don't know if I just never checked in with her or I had forgotten her, but I never saved her contact. It was on an old flip phone that my parents had given me at the time when I was that young, and they didn't have a good texting or calling plan at the time. Anyway, cut to a good while later, 2021. A lot of drama is happening in my family, which I won't get into, but topics about my childhood and how I was treated are being brought up. I asked my mum about that year being forced to go outside more and if that was her decision or my father's. Spoilers, it was my father's. I brought up how it wasn't that bad though, and that I had Alice to hang out with. And that sparked a bit of a nostalgic happiness that I hadn't felt in a while, thanks to how bad that and the previous year was for us. Well, my mum then dropped and would tell me something that I continue to think back on over and over again. You mean that imaginary girl you walked around the lake with? I immediately thought that she was just messing with me, but she looked serious, and thought that the time that I asked her to tell Alice that I was going to take a while, that I was talking about an imaginary friend, because she claimed that she never saw anyone when she went down the driveway, apparently. But I know that I had interacted with this girl. I know that I had gone with her to this lake many times, but I never thought about how I was the only person who ever saw her. And never my friend Eric or his brother who sometimes went to the lake with me, not my family, never even met her grandmother as well. Today, I cannot even confirm if I ever had this girl's number, or if I ever even actually texted her. It threw me off a good bit, but then I remembered one thing that made me know that I was right, and that she was real. You see, one time in July when I was walking with Alice to the lake, my grandma had stopped by to give me a soda while she was heading to my house to give my dad something. Well, when I had next talked to my grandma, I brought it up, and she didn't really know what I was talking about at first, not until I brought up Alice. Oh yes, I remember your dad always brought up how you and some girl would walk around the lake, and I thought it was cute. Weird that he thought it was a real girl and not one of your imaginary friends. This absolutely rocked me to the core. I mean, there's just no way that I imagined all of this, and I still have no idea what she could mean by one of my imaginary friends. If I ever find that old phone, if I even still have it in a box somewhere, I'm getting to the bottom of this because I am certain that she was real. Otherwise, who the heck have I been imagining this whole time? Out back of my neck of the woods is an old dirt road. It's hard to access unless you know how to take a turn down another old road that runs around the back of the coal mine that I work at. If you follow that old road, you get to a T-intersection that you can either turn right, out to Hale Creek, or left, which will take you out to Mount Coulon. Now, Mount Coulon isn't much of a town anymore. It's an outback pub, and that's pretty much it. There used to once be a town there, but everyone up and left once the railway line got moved to the coast. That was the only reason the town existed for so long, in fact. Or for as long as it did anyway. It wasn't the start of the town though, you see. Way back in the early 1900s, gold was found in them by a prospector named Thomas Coulon. He staked his claim and settled there with his family. Some local Aboriginals found him and his family living on their land and weren't too happy about it, so they attacked his home, throwing rocks through the windows and generally antagonizing him. Well, Thomas went out and shot the lot of them, all dead, then in a fit of grief over what he had done, sat down on his porch and, well, deleted himself all over the wall behind him. Fast forward to the year 2021, I was working out at Hale Creek Mine at the time on the maintenance crew. I had a big 7 nights of 12-hour shifts and had very little sleep. I had left my mining camp the following afternoon, still not feeling the best, but set out for a long drive back home to Moranbah. Dusk came along, then nightfall. I was driving for what seemed like forever, trying to make my way back home. I was constantly looking out for the turnoff on the old back road that ran up behind a Gunyella mine, but it never came. I kept on driving and driving. Hours went by. I was on very unfamiliar road at this point. It started to bend and twist and turn all over, and narrow to the point that my little Kia Rio could barely get by without scratching the sides on branches of old looming trees hanging over the road. I was definitely lost. So I pulled over to check my Google Maps. No signal, of course. I was really confused though. I mean, did I miss the turn? I thought maybe it's a little further up, so I pressed on and kept driving. Then, out of nowhere, I see an old and worn sign off to the left of me on the side of the old dirt road. Mount Coulon, 15 kilometers. I thought, okay, yep, I've gone way too far out in the sticks here. I better turn around. Before I could, though, I saw off to my right the entrance to what looked like a cemetery with an old and rusty archway, and above on the archway it was, in this rusty rough iron lettering, Betsy's Rest. Oh, my curiosity got the better of me, so I veered in there to have myself a quick squiz. And, sure as heck, there was a road that went into a giant U-shape around an old cemetery full of tombstones. Generations of cattle farmers and jackaroos who all must have worked on the various stations in the area, and it gave me the spooks pretty bad. So I got out of there quickly and made my way back onto the old back road. I kept heading back from whence I came, hoping and praying that I'll find this T-intersection eventually. Over an hour passed, and then my worst fear happened. The fuel light flickered on my dashboard. I'm driving on this road in absolutely the middle of nowhere. It's now midnight. No one will probably find me for days if I ran out of fuel. I was absolutely beside myself. I mean, this is the outback of Australia. You run out of fuel, water, food in the outback, you may have just signed your own death certificate. Pretty much done and dusted, in fact. All I had was a couple of sandwiches that I took from the camp mess hall and a bottle of water. Better than nothing, I suppose, but not enough to last a couple of days stranded on the side of an old back road with no phone signal. So I keep cruising along, being extremely careful not to go too quickly or over-accelerate around all the twists and the turns. As I'm driving along this lonely road, I then see a shadow out of the corner of my eye. I don't think too much of it, staying focused on the road ahead, looking for this turnoff. But then, that's when I hear it. Swooping and sort of whooshing noises above my car. And I mean, what the heck, right? I then look up and see what I can only describe as a giant bat creature with red eyes flying directly above my car. It obviously startles me and makes me accelerate at a rapid rate. Yet, it's flying overhead, gliding effortlessly and keeping in pace with me. I'm watching my speedometer reaching neck-breaking speeds, and I'm bouncing all over the old and bumpy road while this creature glides down to my driver's side window, looks inside at me, and then just grimaces. Then, just as it does, it flies up and just disappears into the night air as quickly as it had appeared. I floored that old clunker of a car of mine until my heart leapt with joy at the sign of life in that desolate hellscape. I saw the Gunyella Mine CHPP's light cut through the vast and empty void of darkness. I knew then and there that I was within 10 to 15 kilometers of the intersection and the turnoff back home. And, thankfully, I found it. I eventually managed to get all the way back home, and I was very grateful that my clunker ran on an oily rag, and the vapors in my tank pretty much kept me alive. I told my partner at the time all about the nightmare that I had been through, as she had been expecting me home the evening prior, and it was now 6 in the morning. My phone was full of missed calls from her, for which I apologized profusely. I hadn't even thought to check my phone, as I had no signal for the better part of the entire journey anyway. And while this was a pretty scary experience, the experience that I had with my partner when I convinced ourselves to drive all the way out there one night was perhaps even worse. It was just to see the actual town, but months had passed and I kept having recurring nightmares about that vile winged creature. It seemed to have entered my dreams at this point. I awoke one night sweating in bed. My heart rate was racing. My partner asked, "What's wrong?" Again? I had been waking her up late at night when I would have this horrible nightmare. The whole situation had really impacted me. The desolate hellscape would re-emerge in the dark nights, plagued by the old outback road menacing my demise, with the off chance that I would make one wrong move and come undone escaping that creature. Something had to be done, and I knew what I needed to do. You see, I'm a man that will openly admit that I cannot overcome anything in life unless I face it head on. That's really the only way that I know. No use sticking your head in the sand and pretending things will just go away, so I spoke with my partner, and after much discussion, we both agreed that we would go back and investigate the back road at Mount Coulon and investigate the town itself. And to really drive the nail in, we were going to do it at night as well. I just needed answers, I guess. I needed to know what lay at the end of that old road, and whatever else I may have missed on my first misadventure. We set out at 6:30 p.m. and headed for the old back road, which now is inaccessible. You can go take a look for yourself, but the mine has shut the gate as it runs along the inside of the mine's boundary. Anyway, we were driving my partner at the time's new Mitsubishi Mirage. It was a real beast of a car, I guess you could say, but it had all the kit that we needed for the long drive, and we made sure that we left prepared. Esky full of food, water and snacks, my toolkit in case of a breakdown, torches, first aid kit, two-way radio, battery pack for phones and the two-way radio, and my trusty hunting knife, which I kept in my side door compartment. I mean, as if I was going out there again completely unarmed with who knows what was out there in the dark. But the first leg of our adventure was actually rather fun. I felt a bit like Colin McRae, taking the old dirt road and twisted and turned in all directions, slithering my way up to the T intersection. Once we got to the intersection, I took the left turn to head north and gradually west. The familiar road was as it was the same night that I encountered the strange flying beast. Except tonight brought a slight amount of comfort as there was a full moon in the night sky illuminating the surrounding and edges of the road. As we approached the old cemetery, I told my partner to look right. She was honestly in awe as well. I asked if she wanted to go take a look, but she was too nervous about it, so I just kept on driving along. As the night went on, we came to the point of no return. The road became nothing more than just a dirt track, interspersed with sealed sections that the local farmers had laid prior to and after crossing old relics of bridges. They were rusty and wrought iron, sturdy still, but foreboding at the same time. We crossed two of them on one stretch, one built over the coal fields railway line heading eastward to the port. Another was over a deep ravine. The bottom was clouded by dense native plants. The road got very narrow at one point, and snaked right and left and down and up. We were in unfamiliar territory now, and I was growing apprehensive about what I would see or find. At one point, though, I could have swore that there was just no road at all. We were basically driving through a wide open field, and I had to drive at 40 kilometers an hour max to avoid any ruts or depressions in the bull dust. I was starting to think this entire trip might have been a mistake when the road then came good again to a compacted dirt section. A random sign appeared off to the right of the road stating that we were now deep in Aboriginal land. The drive went on and on and on. Hours seemed to have passed. Were we any closer to our destination? For reference, I switched the car's function from Bluetooth headset to radio scan, the FM and AM for any signs of life, but there was nothing. I thought, well, I'll check again in an hour, and an hour had passed, so I checked, scanning and scanning. And then there was a muffled and distorted voice emitting through our car all of a sudden. And then the sweet sound of music. Ironically enough as well, it was actually AC/DC's Highway to Hell. How befitting, I thought to myself. I said to my partner, "Hey, check the signal on your phone now." She replied with 2 bars. She immediately checked Google Maps. I parked the car in this small spot of salvation while it loaded up. Now, according to Google Maps, we were about 30 minutes away from a fork in the road. One way heading west out into the Never Never, another heading towards Mount Coulon. A good thing we checked as well, so we headed onwards. And sure enough, there it was, the fork in the road. No signage indicating which way to go, just one road slightly more compact than the other and a bit wider as well. So we kept true to the road that we were on, and then came to a faint glimmer in the distance, a faint yellow light on the horizon. As we approached the light, it developed into a service station, off to the left of the old dirt road with a storefront that looked completely empty, save for a cash register on a countertop. We were now at the main intersection, signage indicating that to head right was to head towards Collinsville, left out west into the Never Never. I came to a stop-off to the right shoulder off the road on a dirt patch made by trucks that had obviously turned here before. I checked the fuel gauge and it was half a tank. I looked into that old rundown service station, scanning the area for any other signs of life outside of the faint yellow glow of the iridescent tube lights above the old and rusted Bowsers that looked like they hadn't been used since the 1980s. Then I saw a figure emerging from a back room. It was a frail old woman, her hair tattered and sort of distressed. It honestly looked like we may have awoken her. The time was now 11:30. She came to a stop inside the abandoned storefront and just stood there, staring at our car. I thought, better come forward and ask if there's any chance of fueling up. So I pulled in and rolled down the window. She came outside into the night air and approached me with a great deal of hesitation. Excuse me. Look, I'm really sorry if I woke you up. We're just wondering if you had any fuel. She stood there, glaring and studying me. Her face withered from the harsh outback climate. She then said, No fuel here. You better leave now. Something felt off about that, the way she spoke. There was a tension between us, I guess. And so I just said, okay, thanks. So sorry again. We'll leave now. Thanks again, and sorry again. So I wound the window up and I just got out of there. We drove around the old pub in the center of what was once the town. It had multiple V double-road train trucks parked all around it, almost like they were protecting the pub itself with a wall of steel and rubber in the desolate darkness. A picnic table with a tin roof cover appeared on the right side of this massive loop road. The only road in the entire area was sealed, even if it was rather narrow. As for lighting, well, what lighting? This place clearly was not welcoming after dark. Albeit for 2 streetlights in the entire area that glowed faintly, only illuminating small patches of the loop road, you definitely wouldn't want to be out here with no headlights. We did the brief tour of all that was out there though, then made our way back towards the road back home. Then eventually made our way back towards the road back home. My partner then said, hold up, so I came to a stop again, off to the side of the road, back out to Moranbah. She had just discovered on Google Maps a quicker way back home, apparently. This way would take us out on that old dirt road, out west into the fork in the road. However, as you continue down that road for 50 kilometers, you'll come to another fork in the road, and taking the leftward track will take us to the Gunyella Road, which then headed back home. Good eye, I said to her. So, on we went. Thankfully, the Mitsubishi ran on an oily rag as well. It was only a little 4-cylinder powerhouse like my Kia Rio, so I felt confident that we'd make it back. On the drive back, it was another long and slow slog. At some points, I'd have to slow to like 20 kilometers per hour, just to make it around some tight bends and twistings, and turning through the roughened thoroughfare which went between wide-open cattle farming properties. Then at points, the bushland would thicken around creeks and runoff areas, and you could see a meter off the sides of the road. After taking the leftward turn in what was a slight fork in the road, we made our way homebound, and that was when it happened. Some sort of a large creature came bounding out from the dense bushland and right in front of our car. I came to an abrupt stop immediately, and there in our headlights was a massive cow. It looked at us, then took off back into the bushland. I was a little bit stunned, because that was close, too close. After gathering myself, we went back home, and the rest of the journey was, well, rather mundane to say the least. I guess the only exception was an interesting stretch of road that had been well sealed and snaked through dense bushland. I was impressed by the craftsmanship of how well compacted it was. Then suddenly we were back on dirt road again. Hours on and we made it to the Gunyella Road, intersections with lighting signaling the turn-offs to local mines and explosive factories that make the bomb products for them, and so on and so forth. The usual kin of the coalfields. Then we made it home as the first light of morning emitted from the horizon. Pulling into our driveway, we both looked at each other, shrugged as if to signal, what the heck was all that about? Then got out of the car and we headed inside. It's a strange feeling out there. It's the desolation, I think. The lack of, I guess. It's what really drives the tension, I suppose. I mean, any moment can be fraught with demise, but it gave me the closure that I needed to put to rest the monsters in my head. Because whatever I saw that night when I made that near-fatal misadventure, I guess it's going to remain a mystery for me. Who knows? Maybe that might actually be for the best. We rent a home that, for reasons that no one will explain, is about half of the rental rate in our area. We've been here for about 5 years and the owner has not raised the rent a dime at all. But strange things consistently happen in the house. Most of them are pretty benign and I guess easily dismissed. Things being moved around without explanation, odd noises, feeling like someone is moving around when rooms are empty. But our dog will suddenly start barking at something that he seems to see. Lately though, things have become more, I don't know, I guess the word is aggressive. Several times my wife and I have physically felt something touch us, only to turn and find the room empty. I felt a strong tap on my sternum. My wife had something blow in her ear so deliberate that she actually started crying out of fear. But today was the strangest. So I went to open a door to a stairway down into the basement this morning, and the whole door literally fell onto me. Aside from me, no one in our home is really capable of doing this too. Our kids are way too young. The door was fine last night. I heard nothing during the night. Our dog sleeps next to that door as well, so it's weird that they didn't bark or anything. Really, I just have no explanation, and that's why I'm here. I don't know what to do about any of this. So my question for all of you is, what should we do? So, me, a 32-year-old male, and my brother, 28 and male, and our disabled mother all live together in a trailer about 30 minutes from Nashville, Tennessee. I was wary of moving there at first for the stereotypes you may hear about trailer parks, but luckily we've had zero issues in the 10 years that we've been here. We have very nice neighbors, well-kept yards, etc., etc. About a week ago, we were finally putting up our Christmas tree, drinking probably too much beer, listening to Christmas music, Christmas spirit in full swing. During our random banter, my brother says, "Oh yeah, I can't believe I forgot to tell you earlier today. At work, the owner had to kick out some guy who was acting super creepy." My brother works at the Stocker, at a family-owned little market about a mile from our home. He went on to tell me that this younger-looking guy was pacing the aisles, sometimes standing still for minutes at a time and not responding when the owner would ask if he needed help finding something. After about 20 minutes of this, the owner asked him to please leave because he was apparently scaring the customers, and without a word, he left. Anyway, we continue with our good time, hanging ornaments, drinking, getting our mum involved as well, with ornaments, not the drinking of course, and all is good. We wrap up at around 10:30 p.m, help our mum to bed, she's in a wheelchair, and decide that we might as well finish off the ton of beer that we have left and just admire our decked out tree. Around 11:30, we decided to go on the front porch to share a cigarette as we usually do when we've tied on a good buzz. My brother opens the door and almost immediately closes it. I ask what's up and he says, "No way, the guy I was telling you about, just like Michael Myers, walked down the street past our house, dude. I thought that was pretty strange, but I wasn't super concerned. We waited a few minutes, then went and smoked as we did usually, and went back inside. Now, my brother and I aren't troublemakers at all, but I'm pretty confident in our ability to defend ourselves if we had to. At this point, these are just thoughts in the back of my mind, though. After all, I haven't even seen this guy. Yet, anyway. Fast forward to about 2 in the morning. We're more than drunk enough to go ahead and call it a night, after one more ciggy. My brother opens the door, and within seconds I hear him say, Whoa, hey man, you good? Hey, buddy, what's up? You good? I'm in the kitchen at that time, but quickly decided that this doesn't sound right and rush over to the door. What I see when I get to the open door is a younger man standing on our deck about 3 feet from our front door. He's pretty tall, about 6'4", and another thing that I noticed is that he looks a lot like Adam Driver, which was a detail my brother jokingly mentioned earlier during tree time, so I'm realizing for the first time that this must be the guy that he's been talking about. One thing my brother must not have got close enough to notice at work, though, was this guy's eyes. I am not exaggerating when I say that I've never seen anything like it. His body language was super menacing, but his eyes were the strangest combination of wide-eyed bewilderment and fury. Like us opening our front door confused him and also made him very angry. I joined my brother in explaining to him that it's late and that he should head home. After what I'd say was about 30 seconds of staring, he just walked off without a word. I peeked out of our blinds to make sure that he really left and saw nothing. We both tried to laugh it off and were saying things like, well, that was pretty weird, huh? But it took a while for my adrenaline to sort of taper down. But the thing that I kept thinking to myself that bothered me was those 30 seconds to me felt like he was the one deciding what the next move would be. But what that could have been, I have no idea. I also didn't love that my brother said when he opened the door he was already standing there, so for how long was he actually there for? We calmed down watching some YouTube videos in the end, and after about 30 minutes or so, I say to my brother, okay man, let's just go to bed. I'll take one more look outside to be safe, but I feel like it wasn't really necessary. I open the door and he's back again. The streetlights are paced very far apart in our trailer park, but at the edge of our driveway, there, I see his silhouette probably 50 feet away again, just staring at our front door. I feel I should mention here that he's not there texting or on the phone with someone or anything. He's just standing there. I feel bad in hindsight because I'm sure this poor guy definitely has mental health issues, but between being drunk and exhausted and the look he gave us earlier, I was just over it. I finally put some bass into my voice and said, hey man, you can't just stand in our driveway. You're being creepy, dude. Just please leave. I really don't want to call the cops on you, so just don't make me do it. This seemed to work. His demeanor didn't change at all, but the word cops seemed to do the trick. He turned around and he walked away. In the end, I really hope that we handled that well. I understand and empathize with people with mental health problems and have friends and family who unfortunately suffer from those things too. However, I still cannot shake the feeling that something bad could have happened that night. He didn't finally leave our porch earlier that night until I showed up to the door, essentially making him outnumbered, and even then he still came back afterward. Look, I hope he's okay out there. We haven't seen him since. I also hope not calling the police wasn't a bad choice and that he isn't out there with bad intentions on somebody else's front deck at like 2 in the morning, who lives alone or is elderly, etc. I wish I could have figured out what that was all about, but during every interaction me or my brother had with him that day and night, he just never spoke a word, which in the end is perhaps the creepiest part of this whole event. So every summer in my city, me and my friends like to make small campfires in chill, secluded areas because we don't want to drive an hour to an actual campsite and pay any campsite fee to do so. These also happen pretty spontaneously, so it's a nice last-minute hang just to do for us. There's this one spot near my house that's located by a river that's really nice because no one usually goes there. The only thing to be worried about are bears though, because living in the Pacific Northwest is challenging like that, and my house specifically is located right next to the mountains and the forest. Now, one particular night at 11 PM, I decided to go ahead of my friends and meet them at the spot and set things up early because I want us to be chilling once they all get here. The spot that I get to has a 2-minute paved walkway I have to go through, and then I have to take a small trail ramping down the right side of the bridge that crosses over the river. Along this paved walkway are 2 lamps located at halfway and another at the start of the bridge or the ramp down to the campfire spot. So, I park my car at the beginning of the trail on the street and bring my campfire stuff, like flashlight, lighter, small firewood, small shovel to dig out the pit, etc. I get to the spot, and it's a small sandy beach kind of embankment on the side of the river, with a small wading area for toddlers with their families during the hot summers. I set up the chair, and I get to dig in the pit with only my flashlight illuminating where I'm digging. I'm also shoveling the sand right next to me, nowhere near the water. But all of a sudden I hear a loud splash. A splash so loud that it can only come from something equally large, like a 2-hand-sized rock or something. I'm confused because I swear that I'm not throwing my sand into the water, even though I'm only a few feet away, I guess. I shine my flashlight at the water, and I don't see anything. So I kind of just brush it off, thinking I'm just hearing things. But as I keep shoveling a bit more, I hear another loud splash. At this point, I think something is falling from above because logically something must be falling into the water. I point the flashlight above where some trees are above the river, and I don't see anything big enough to make that sort of splash. So as I keep digging, with my heart rate kind of going at this point, I hear a rustling past the arch where the bridge goes over the river. I quickly grab my light and shine it towards where I heard the rustling. I call out, "Hello?" There's no response. In my own head, it was a bear. I should be getting out of there immediately, but there was no bear or signs of anything for that matter. So I tell myself I must just be hearing things now because, I've seen horror movies before and my mind is playing tricks on me, right? But then I hear the noise again and it clearly sounds like leaves being rustled, so I shine my flashlight over to the area again, and as I focus my eyes towards the illuminated area, I then see the naked back of a man hunched over. I was kind of frozen in anxiety and stress because, honestly, of all the things I was to see, I didn't think that I'd see the naked back of some dude. From the quick analysis my brain could muster up, he looked to be in mid-40s, shaved, not bald, and medium-ish build, like a mix between chubby and built, I guess. But as I had my flashlight staying on his back, he started to stand up, and the first thing that I noticed was that he was not wearing any pants either. My next reflex was to start packing up all my stuff and getting the heck out of there because now I'm piecing in my head that he must have been throwing things into the water to scare or shoo me away. So after using my reflexive deductive skills, I proceeded to speed walk out of there with all of my stuff. I'm carrying all of my things with me and briskly walking up the ramp, and I'm now on the paved path out of the forest. I can feel my heart beating in my chest, and I'm frequently looking back to make sure that I'm not being followed. I am in Crocs, mind you, so I'm hoping that if I have to book it out of here, I'd regret not being in sport mode from the get-go. I make it to the halfway point though, and a sense of relief starts setting in knowing that I made it safely out of this very scary situation. But as I check behind me for the final time, I see something slowly creeping over the ramp is the naked man crawling on all fours as if he was a primate walking. His head was positioned towards me, looking at me as he made his way to the middle of the paved walkway. He slowly then gets up from his stance and starts standing on his feet and positions his body to face me. After setting himself into this new position, the man then starts running towards me. Well, at that, I absolutely booked it. I ran as hard and as fast as I could down that path. My flashlight jumped out of my pocket at one point and I lost it, but I didn't care because, a whole naked man was chasing me at 11 p.m. at night in a secluded forest. I looked back for a split second, and the man was still running towards me, still completely naked. He could have my flashlight for all I cared at that moment. I wanted to make it out of this situation alive. I finally made it out of the forest, and I run to my car, which is only 30 feet away from the end of the forest. I desperately get to my car and, like a classic horror movie, I fumble with trying to get my key fob to unlock my car. And yes, I actually dropped my keys and quickly think to myself, I'm actually going to die. But I brush the thought off and pick them up. I finally get a hold of my fob properly, unlock my doors, and throw my things into the back seat before quickly getting into the driver's seat. This felt like an eternity, but in hindsight was most likely about 6 seconds altogether. As I try to guide my key into the ignition, I am fixated on the end of the paved path that I was just at a few seconds ago, waiting to see if the naked man was still coming. I feel my key to go into the ignition, and I switch my sights onto the road in front of me, and then I zoom out of the area as fast as I could. As I drive away, and I'm a good 30 seconds from the location of the horror that just took place, I get a call on my phone. It was my friends calling me asking if I'd made it to the spot yet, and all I say to them is, "Guys, do I have a crazy story to tell you?" They pull up to my house because, again, it was actually decently close to the campfire area, and I tell them the whole story the way that I told it just now. They swear that it was none of them trying to prank me or anything like that too, and I also knew none of them would try to full sprint at me with their dong out like that. But as we're just talking out in front of my house, there's a college student who looks like he was walking home that's going towards the direction of where I encountered the naked man. I just yelled out to him, "Hey, man, be careful, there's a naked guy that was chasing me by the bridge that crosses over the river there." He responds saying, "Oh really? I gotta go over the bridge to go home." All I tell him is, "Good luck, man." The next day I reported it to the police by phone, but they sent over an officer so I could tell them in person and show them where the area that I saw these things was at. When we went to see where I initially saw the man's back hunched over, they said that they didn't see any trace of anyone being there previously. But the officer did say that they would make a note of it anyways, in case it ever happens again. Some friends say that it was a skinwalker. Others say, more realistically, that it's either a homeless, mentally ill, or drunk or high person. One theory I've heard my friends say is that it's a future version of me pulling a prank on past version of me because, honestly, if or when time travel is real, I would totally screw with my younger self like that. Anyway, that's my story, and it's something that will always stick with me. That feeling of running away like that in the dark is something that will never leave me. It is something that I often still talk about with all of my friends. So, I was on an ocean crossing from San Pedro, California, to Papeete, Tahiti, on a 60-foot sloop. We left in early July. It was 5,500 miles, and it was me, first mate, another crew, and a first-time captain. I was the head of night watchman along with the other crewmen. It was the night of day 12 as well, and we were like 1,000+ nautical miles from any land, and there were no ships on the AIS for hundreds of miles. It was around 3 in the morning, 2 hours before my shift was done, and we had a policy of only using red light in the cockpit at night to save our night vision in case we need to go forward and fix something. I was looking at the nav when I felt something watching me from the aft of the ship. there's not a lot of interaction with anything other than the crew out there, so you know when there's another presence almost. Happens a lot when there's whales or dolphins too. Hard to explain, but if you know, you know. Anyway, the ship had a swim step on the stern and a 2-ish foot tall transom until you got into the actual cockpit. I looked back at the stern, and crouching on the swim step, so only its forehead, eyes, and hands were visible, was a blackish grey thing. Whatever it was bold and looked shiny, and it was staring intently directly at me with beady eyes reflecting the red light due to the cockpit. I completely froze, and after meeting its gaze for a few moments, stared directly ahead at the nav. A moment later, I heard a splash which made me look back, and when I did, it was gone. The crewman with me didn't see it, and I didn't say anything about it for a couple of days. Then at dinner one evening, the captain told us of something that he had seen in the early hours of the morning ring that day. A dark, slender thing, treading water next to the ship, lazily bobbing there but never taking its eyes off of the captain. I then relayed my story to him and the crewman, and we just couldn't come up with an explanation. We didn't see anything else for the rest of the trip, but we all did get that sense that we were being watched when we were alone on the deck. So, Soren, mermaid, sea demon, I have no idea. My name is Anastasia, and a few days ago, something happened that, whenever I think about it, makes me feel sick. You see, we moved to an East Coast town about maybe a year ago to be closer to family. So close, in fact, that my aunt, her wife, and my cousins are only 10 minutes walk from my house. Granted, we are very spaced out and borderline rural despite living about 15 minutes from the outskirts of a big city. But in any case, I was walking my 2 little dashhounds back home from my aunt's house. My mum hates it when I'm alone the majority of the day, so I spend time at their house, and I was genuinely enjoying my time. It was cold and quiet, but oddly beautiful that day. I got home, fed my pups and 2 birds, and FaceTimed a friend. I was talking with them and doing chores, and was admittedly being loud and giggly when taking out the trash to the cans on the side of my house. I get back inside and lay down in bed still chatting, when my bird starts calling out at something. Now, anyone who has owned a parrot knows that they have a distinct noise for certain moments. She's been in my family for like 76 years and with me my whole life, so I knew the sound was alarm or intrigue. I brush it off as her seeing herself in the window reflection and go back to talking to my friend. I get up to get some water and my back is to the sliding glass door, thankfully locked, when my friend has the wind knocked out of him. I'm confused and think that he's hurt, and he tells me, "Go back to your room now." I initially scoff, but then I see it in my camera view. There is a man with his face and hands pressed up against the glass door. He's a middle-aged white guy in a grey pullover and dark pants, and with a grin on his face. My friend, ever the best in panic situation, tells me, "Don't look at him, just go to your room." I was shaking so hard, I'm blubbering and decide to lock me and my dogs in my closet. My parrot is still going crazy, mind you. English isn't my first language, and it's bad when I'm shocked, so I revert back to my native language, which he doesn't know. Luckily, my friend knows to take charge, and he tells me that he'll be over in 10 and he calls the police. I'm thinking that I can run to my mum's room and find the gun, so if the guy comes into the house, I can blow a quarter-sized hole in his chest if I need to. I'm debating getting up when I hear tapping on my window. It's slow and intentionally creepy, and my stupid dog starts barking. I'm ready to accept my death at this point. I'm a teenage girl, home alone, and I am about to die, it seems. But wait, my aunt should about to be leaving for work at this point. I shoot her a quick text telling her that there's a man at our place. The tapping has stopped and I then think it's over when I realize something that makes my heart fall into my stomach. I left the front door unlocked when I took out the trash. This keeps getting worse and I beg my friend to hurry. The tapping thankfully returns to my window and I can only close my eyes and hope that someone gets here quickly. It felt like such a long time crying to another teen who's breaking multiple traffic laws. Never before have I been so grateful to hear another man's voice yelling outside of my house at 1 a.m. It was my God-sent neighbor. Apparently his pregnant wife was having bad nausea and went out on the deck, and where it's situated you can see my whole backyard. She got a bad feeling after seeing the unfamiliar man approach my door and woke her husband up to check it out. And honestly, I thank God every day for that woman, because I think she may have actually saved me. I let my neighbors into my house and my aunt comes about 4 minutes later, packing major heat. My friend was not long after her. I went from home alone to an impromptu house party of concerned people. The police get there like 10 minutes later and they didn't just take 30 minutes to arrive to the scene either, which is not normal, right? On the brighter side, my bird wasn't too alerted by this encounter and went back to eating not 5 minutes later, and my dogs were just as happy to see all the people as I was. My friend has been staying the nights with me since then. I'm honestly finding it hard to be home alone at this point, despite the fact that an arrest was actually made. I'm thankful that my neighbor had such good instincts and that my aunt and friend were so quick on their feet, because honestly, this could have been just so much worse. I live in the Klamath Mountains in eastern Oregon, about 20 miles from the Californian border. Growing up, I spent a lot of time outside camping, hunting, fishing, etc. Well, a few months ago, I had a strange experience on a family trip to our cabin near Crater Lake, and I wanted to see if anybody else could help me maybe find more info on what I saw. So, I was by myself birdwatching in a small pond in the woods, maybe half a mile from the cabin in the late afternoon. I was sitting on a big log with binoculars. I wasn't in a blind or anything, but I picked a spot where I thought I'd be less visible to any animals. After about an hour, I hadn't seen much, except a few common ducks, and it didn't seem like many animals were very active, so I was thinking about leaving. This was maybe about an hour before sunset, I think. But then I saw something move in the trees across the pond, probably 100 feet away. It was just a flash between trees, and I didn't really get any kind of good look at it. But I kept watching the spot, and after maybe 5 minutes, I saw something dart from one tree to another. It was bigger than most any local bird, except maybe a heron, and moved very fast without making any noise. But I still didn't really know what I was looking at. This happened again a few minutes later, and then again a few minutes after that. Each time it seemed to be moving closer as well, to the pond that is. I don't think it knew that I was there, but it was staying incredibly well hidden, and only revealed itself for a split second at a time. At this point, I'm thinking maybe it's a kit fox or a pine marten because of how fast and silently it moved. But I still hadn't got a good look at it, any part of it, in any detail yet. It moved between trees a few more times, until it was behind a big dead tree right on the shore. I was staying as still and silent as possible, but still worried that it would see or more likely smell me and I would spook it. But after a few more minutes, I saw something move at the edge of the water. A little arm and hand that looked just like a human's reached out and touched the mud, and then the head and the other arm came into view as it leaned out to drink from the water. I could only see the head and the shoulders and arms from where I was, but they looked so much like a person's, except it was way too small and covered in what looked like, I don't know, like grayish brown fur. The face wasn't exactly human either. more monkey-like, but it was too far away to see much detail. I decided to lift my binoculars to get a closer look, but as soon as I moved, it looked up and then disappeared back behind the tree again. I watched until it started to get dark, but I didn't see it again, not even darting behind the trees. I went back to the cabin and I told my grandpa what I saw. He's been a rancher in this area his whole life, and he said, "Sounds like you ran into a hide-behind," and just laughed. I said, "No, Grandpa, seriously, this isn't a joke." He said that he'd heard stories about Bigfoot and hide-behinds and several times saw little human footprints on hunting trips deep in the mountains where, really, no children would be. What I mean is that I think he believed me, but he really didn't know much. I asked my dad and brothers, but they just started giving me a hard time about squatching. I went back to the pond the next day and walked around to where the creature had been, but I didn't find any tracks or scat or fur or anything. I did figure that it had to be probably about 3.5 or 4 feet tall based on the trees that I'd seen it near, but narrow enough to hide completely behind a pine, which makes me think that it must have been standing and moving upright. And really, that's it. I wish I'd seen more of it, but that face and hands were absolutely not like any local animal. It looked very much like a monkey or a furry little human. I've tried to find more info, but the only cryptid people seriously talk about